Hello. I'm going to give everyone a minute to arrive, and then we'll get started. So as always, just let me know when you can hear me and we will get started. I think I see myself. Can you hear me okay? Hello, testing. Can you hear me? I just need one person to say, yes, we can hear you, and then we'll get started. Thank you, Laura and Julie. Okay, so, all right, tonight's live is going to be a little bit of a doozy. In light of the sensitive topic we're talking about, I am just asking on behalf of all of the moderators that we just be extra careful in our commentary. This is not going to be a troll session. These lives never are. But we just want to tiptoe through the tulips on this topic, especially. And right from the start, I just want to qualify something that, I know people have asked, okay, well, why is she addressing this topic? And my goal in these lives is to tell the victims' stories, ultimately the victims who lost their lives. And Colby is a part of this story, but I want to say sincerely, and I do have witnesses. I don't just say one thing in the live, but then live a completely different life. I'm comfortable with my life. I'm comfortable with how I process things. I don't need to be disingenuous. I do have a great deal of empathy for Colby. As many of you know, I've known him since he was a little boy. The whole reason I testified against my brother was was that I didn't like the way he treated Colby. And, and I've made this point in other lives. Had I known that he never adopted Colby, I seriously doubt I would have testified against him, because I believe that Lori was under compulsion to provide Colby for visitation. And she was honest about the fact that Colby was at some of these visits, because I see references to it in the FOIA docs. It doesn't make sense to me. Like, if she didn't have to present him for visitation and there were these allegations, why would she voluntarily, send him? But that's not the topic of this live. It is that I just want to say at the outset that I'm not out to get Colby. I do have a great deal of empathy for him. Ultimately, I put all of this on Lori and Chad. Ultimately, and they were the architects of this nightmare, and it was within their way of processing the world was to use everyone around them. And I've talked about, even in the last live, how Lori exploits. I mean, she looks for anything that she can use to exploit someone. And she's always looking to see how she can use those character issues or trauma or anything that she can grab a hold of to use it to her benefit. And I certainly see that with Colby. I mean, even as a mom. So, I have kids. They're all adults, and they've experienced financial challenges at times. Just the whole idea of setting Venmo transactions to public is so outside the realm of possibility for me. Like if I help my kids, there's no way that's not even going to be set to friends only. It's just so inconceivable to me. And you see these types of things. And so Lori wasn't just helping Colby out of the goodness of her heart, though I do believe that she did have a great deal of sincere love for Colby. It was just looking for anything to exploit. And we will see that thread throughout this story. Having said that, I know, I saw on someone right before I started the live decided to regale all of us with their amazing bass. So hopefully that doesn't translate. There's nothing I can do about it. But anyway, it's just life in the city. But anyway, so, all right. So I know I read someone's concerned that this would turn speculative. This is not going to turn speculative. In fact, I'm following a very different format than I have for other lives to make this as dry and fact-oriented as possible. I will explain enough just to make connections, but it's much more like an analyst looking for correlations. And there's not going to be, I don't think that there's going to be any speculation, even outside this particular topic. I'm much more careful about anything that's speculative in a public format. So, but especially with this topic. And I don't even know that I'm going to get through all of it tonight. So if I don't, then we're going to have to stretch this out into 2 weeks because we're not going to go until 1 o'clock in the morning. But there will also be more material that for those of you who are following the case very closely, but also just for transparency's sake, I've baked in a lot of citations so that people can keep me honest, because this isn't just my opinion that I'm going to be presenting. I'm actually going to follow a timeline format with this particular live, which I haven't done before. So I'm not going to belabor this anymore. We're just going to jump in. Just please be kind. Okay. All right. And I'm not talking about to me. I mean, obviously, if you're rude, you're going to be muted. I asked the moderators for this particular live, let's not boot people. Like, let's not block people unless you just come in swinging and you're a sock puppet. Then they can recognize those. But but if you start pulling the chat in a direction that the mods know I'm not comfortable with, they're just going to mute you just for the sake of propriety. So, okay. All right. So now I'm going to share my screen. All right. So what I did for this live is I've used this tool before. It's an interactive timeline. And the approach that I'm going to take, this is just kind of a 100-foot view, and it actually doesn't cover the whole timeline. And this does not cover everything that's in the timeline on my analytics site. What I did with this is I followed kind of a color-coded approach. So anything that talks about Venmo, those are in green. Anything that involves Colby directly will be in orange. Anything around murder is going to be in red and underneath the timeline. And then other supporting details for the sake of finding correlations will be in blue. Okay, having established that, let's just jump in. So a couple points I wanted to make from the beginning. The first Venmo that we have from Tylee to Colby was actually in December. I think I'm going to share this timeline. If I figure out how to turn off comments, I just don't want to be babysitting this timeline and let trolls just take over. So it's not set to public now, and I probably won't ever set it to public. It'll be set to, if I can figure out the comment thing, it'll be set to those with the link can access it. And that's just so that it's not picked up by Google. So the way that it works, if I am able to figure out how to turn off comments, and hopefully it'll be pretty straightforward, but if you just hover over a particular node, you'll see the date. And then if you click it, it will open up the more information about that particular node. I have a lot of links in these individual nodes, and those are also clickable. So the nodes themselves, or these individual events, are clickable, as is any link inside. So the first point I want to make is Lori's earliest Venmo that I could see. Now I can see a few more Venmos, or I used to be able to until some of them started being set to private. This was after Lori was already in jail, and that is certainly within anyone's right to set things to private. They should have all been set to private to begin with, a point I've already made. But Lori's earliest Venmo that is available was Christmas Day 2018. And these sources, they just open up either screenshots or videos. So you can use that. Now, a few notes I wanted to make about this is, one, Colby said his mom that his mom was using Tylee's Venmo to send him money because she didn't know how to use Venmo. She wasn't tech savvy, so she was just using Tylee's. But Lori did have a Venmo, and she was using it, and she had been sending payments to both him as well as Kelsey. I think this one to Kelsey, excuse me, and I think a few to other people. Okay, so let's just open that. And these are just video snippets about this particular topic.
So now there's this also Venmo transaction. Right. So if you want to know about it, she has a Venmo account. You can confirm that Venmo account, Tylee Ryan, that's her account. That's her account. And you got transactions in October, a couple times in October. But is that her paying you, or is that your mom using it? Yeah, so my mom is using Venmo. My mom was not tech savvy, so Tylee's account for Venmo was the one that she used to transfer money to us. So Tylee knew how to use Venmo, and so that's why that was ever there. And so she had just sent money through Tylee and said, done, or whatever the case was. So she had just sent that in October. There's never been a time in your life using Venmo with Tylee that she may have Venmoed you anything personally, like her money, like, I wanted to buy you this. She had a couple of times, like she said, for Riley or something like that. But primarily, it was from my mom to us through Tylee. Obviously, I don't know if Tylee's Venmo other people, but to us, Tylee's Venmo was from my mom.
Okay. In fact, Lori was so tech savvy, she actually had two Venmo accounts. So when she got one of her burner phones, which one of her burner phones was also a smartphone. You can't have two Venmos on one phone. So that's just a restriction built into Venmo. So she has this, her main Venmo, and then she started another Venmo. And Colby knew his mom had two Venmo accounts because he told detectives on December 23rd that she had two accounts. It says Colby provided me with screen captured images of Venmo transactions to his account from both Lori's account, and the accounts are redacted, of course. Colby said Lori would be sending him payments from Venmo account from this is probably Tylee's Venmo account. I didn't try to unredact this. Colby also provided a second Venmo account for Lori, identified as whatever, but Colby has not received any payments from that account. So he did know that she had two accounts. Okay. So moving right along, you see that there's a bit of a lull. Now, that doesn't mean that she wasn't sending him money or Charles wasn't sending him money, because I know, like any parent can also send their kids money through their bank account. A lot of times kids will start with a bank account that uses the same bank that, you use as a parent. And so I can transfer money to my kids through my bank account or through Venmo. And if they need it fast, I do it through the bank account. But okay, so there's this Venmo transfer from Lori. We don't know the amount because Venmo doesn't expose that. It's just for a car battery. This was on April 1st. Oh, there was one other point that I wanted to make. And might have been in here. Yeah. So I just charted out just in general, like the trend of the Venmos by month, which I thought I would just share just to kind of kick things off. So in April, there were 8 Venmos that we know of. There were 8. And then May, there were 7. June drops off to 4. July, there were 0. August, 3. September, 4. October and November, they were high transfer months. And then December, it dropped down to 7. Okay. And you'll see that I just like to kind of show that 100-foot view because you'll see this kind of clustering. And not everything in blue is, or even green, they're not necessarily going to correlate. They're just kind of key events. And sometimes these do have some degree of correlation. At least they appear that way. Excuse me. So there was one other thing I'm not going to go into everyone, but one thing I will say is the ones that say Venmo transfer, it's because these came from the Gilbert FOIA doc, the last FOIA doc to be released. Is that right? No. Well, anyway, it was the one that was released last year. I think it was the last one. Yeah. Anyway, so we don't know who sent these. All we know is that it was either Tylee or Lori. Now, with some of them, I already knew who had made the transfers because I grabbed some of the screenshots early on before they started being set to private. And I always had a few more than what was available to the public, only because Lori and I were friends on Venmo. Okay, so if it says Venmo transfer, it's just because I don't know who made that transfer. If I do know from looking at the screenshot that I have originally, then I actually have access to what the Venmo transfer said, like the note that is included. And one thing you will see, and you just kind of need to tuck this away, when Lori sends Colby Venmos, she tends to write things out. And Colby makes this point in his interview with Dr. Phil, which we will listen to that snippet at some point if we get to it tonight, where he talks about how he could tell that that the text messages that he was getting from Tylee didn't sound like Tylee. And one of the things that he references that sometimes things were written out where she would tend to use emojis. And you see that with this. I mean, this is, no offense to people who write love you with a U. I mean, this kind of like goes back to like the early flip phone days. But anyway, I call this Karenese. But you don't see Tylee write things out like this. And there was another one, where she actually wrote out love you. And you'll see with some of the Venmos that were sent to Colby after Tylee had been murdered, Lori wrote things out. You'll also see that Tylee has this tendency to use orange hearts and emojis. Now, this is just a function of this particular software. It rejected emojis, and I had filled in all of the, like a whole bunch of Venmo, events, and then it said that it can't accept emojis. So I had to go back through and find all the emojis and write in, like in brackets, 2 orange hearts, and then it had exclamation marks. And so orange hearts were to Tylee what lime green hearts are to me. And anyway, so, okay. Feel free to poke around there. I want to see if there's anything more to hit on. It is notable that this March date here, March 28th, this is when Lori returned to their home in Gilbert, and Charles and Kay were packing up. So Lori came in, I'm sure it was the mother of all awkward moments. Charles offered to fly her to Houston. She said she had a commitment with a friend and would come see JJ in about 2 weeks. I'm not going to click on these. Like I said, hopefully I will figure out how to be able to share this without having to babysit this thing. But when you click on it, you'll see it's either going to be, a screenshot or a video. And again, this is mostly for transparency and things that I was kind of looking for when I dug into this, and I'm going to zoom in a little bit more, is sometimes, in a month like April, where there were more Venmo transactions, also this is kind of early on in the chaos, it's debatable if there is a correlation. But one thing you will see as this live progresses is that when Lori is doing things that are kind of shifty, she tends to have more Venmo transfers. Now, of course, these are only Venmo. I only include Venmo transfers to Colby, with the exception of that one that was to Kelsey, but that was just to mark the first time that Lori used Venmo. So I don't include other Venmos that she had to like other people. But here you'll see like this particular weekend, this was April 26th to April 29th. And Lori and Chad spent the weekend together in Houston. This was under the pretense of Chad speaking at a youth event. So they had, clearly worked this out, and Lori sent an email from a Karen Walker, inviting him to come and speak to their youth. And that was really just a guise for them to be able to be together. So, yeah. And then one thing that I thought was interesting, this is just a quick aside. Sometimes this happens, but Lori actually used this same technique with Jason Mao. The first time she sent an email to Jason, she invited him to come speak to the youth at her church. So she kind of uses that as a pretense to get her claws in someone. I mean, you could tell from that first podcast that Jason did, he was more than a willing victim to be clawed by Lori Vallow. He was very, very flattered. Okay. Another thing that was interesting. So on May 5th, Lori saved a screenshot of a Malachite stone. So this actually wasn't a ring. And I don't know why these are not resolving, because they did when I opened them up and when I created them. So I'm not sure what's up with that. Let me try something. I'm going to try editing it just because I'm just going to see if I come in here and manually grab it in the event that it's a screenshot I really want to show. Does that make a difference? No. Okay. All right. Well, we'll just move on. All right. Okay, so this was interesting to me, and hopefully I'll figure out why this Bitly isn't working. I used Bitly's because they're shorter than having like a really long link. Clearly, that was a mistake. But there was this screenshot of a Malachite stone that they found in her iCloud account. And it never occurred to me before that this wasn't a ring. This was just the stone. And I thought that was incredibly interesting, not so much for this particular live. There were Venmo transfers, but I think that might have been more associated with this event, or it might not. We don't know. But it is very, very interesting to me that no, she was resolute about Malachite. And I've already talked about, I may just have a live all about Malachite because I think it is interesting. Anyway, more Venmo transfers. Some are from Tylee. You'll see, whoops. Trying to get back out of edit mode. Okay. Oh gosh. I think this might be a function of sharing my screen. We'll see. We'll just keep going. But I'm in this edit mode. I'm going to try leaving and coming back in. Okay. All right, great. I'm out of edit mode now. All right. This tool is a little on the buggy side, but it was the only one that that offered what I'm looking for and was shareable. But okay. I was just going to click on these just to, that one I already clicked on. This is just another orange heart, and I'm just going to see if, okay, so some of the Bitly's work. All right. Okay. Now we're coming up to July. This is where it starts getting a little crunchier, much more activity going on that involves Colby. And when I say involves Colby, that doesn't, I'm not suggesting anything nefarious. I'm just saying like he joins the story. Okay. So on July 2nd, Charles had sent a text to Adam saying that he had told Lori he wasn't going to pay for Colby's car any longer. Hopefully this one, okay, good. This one opens up. So this was a text exchange between the two of them. This is the relevant part. This is Charles to Adam. He said, and she said, I write it, no hesitation at all about lying, none, zero. There are several other outrageous things she's done that I caught her dead to rights, and she still denies it. We can go over those before you go. Also, get ready. I've been telling her if Colby can't pay for the Explorer, that was his car at the time, or the insurance, he can't keep them. So now I'm going to be accused by everyone else of taking his car. And this, I have no doubt that Lori used this to help kind of forge Colby's loyalty to her. I saw this dynamic play out even when she was married to Joe. She loves to be the good guy and really exploits anyone who is the bad guy. Okay. So then on July 9th, this was the day that Lori found out about the intervention Charles and Adam were planning. And we know that her family was over because Melanie Gibb was trying to come over. I believe she wanted a front row seat. A lot of people were over. There was a lot going on. There was a lot of drama. And I think that she just wanted a front row seat because Lori texted Melanie, who wanted to come over. All my family and the kids are here. So it's chaos right now. So just making it really clear, she does not qualify who all her family is and all the kids are. So this is just a possibility that Colby was there with his daughter. So, okay. And this is the screenshot. I'm not going to go through all of it. I'm just showing it. So, if you are inclined to pause the video, watch this later, pause the video, you can read through that. Okay. I've talked about that in a couple of other lives. And I'm going to zoom in a little bit more just to kind of make things a little clearer. Of course, as we know, Charles was killed on July 11th. I shouldn't say, of course, as we know, people can jump into this case at any point. So Charles Vallow was killed on July 11th. Then and there was also a pool party that night. We've talked about that quite a bit. Oh, yeah, I actually did include this. So Colby was there. The way that we found out about the pool party is this gentleman had joined a group that I was actually a part of. A lot of us were a part of this group. I can never remember the name of. It was, I think, I have to look it up. By the time I finished the live, I forget all about it. But it was like real something massacre. Definitely had massacre in it. Anyway, doesn't matter. So he was the landlord, and he said, I've known Lori and Charles since they moved to Chandler many years ago. We rented them the first home they lived in for around 5 years before moving to Kauai. I'd say we were good friends. There are some typos. My family visited them, Charles, Lori, Tylee, and JJ in Kauai. When they returned to Chandler, Charles and I had several conversations during Lori's disappearance, February 2019. He came to my house and cried, telling me he's so sad and that he can't believe she just abandoned JJ. A few text messages followed, and then they resurfaced as Charles tried to make the marriage work. We then rented Charles and Lori another home in June 2019, where Charles was murdered July 11th. Lori moved into this home with the kids. I think her move-in date, was like June 20th. So she was only there for a very short period of time, meaning in Houston. Okay. Charles and I were texting the night before on July 10th at 7:49 p.m. and planning to meet in the morning to find him another place to live because it wasn't working out with Lori. That was the morning he was shot. Many very weird events followed. When the neighbors informed me police were at the house and yellow tape surrounded, I immediately texted both Charles and Lori, "Are you okay?" No response until around 11 a.m. and Lori replied, "We are okay. I'll explain later." She and Alex were taken to Chandler PD for questioning and released. That day, the neighbors reported a pool party at the house the same day Charles was murdered. Let me see if I can get rid of this annoying thing. Okay. With loud music and lots of people swimming. Neighbors also reported Alex was staying at the house for several days following the shooting, even though he lived in the same area. I spoke with Lori several times days following the shooting, and she never sounded shocked, sad, or heartbroken, as you would think a bride would be watching her husband die. I asked her to move out, which she did August 31st. No communication as to where she was going. I really liked Charles and miss his smile and Louisiana, Texas twang accent. He was generous and a family man. Such a terrible loss. I'm so sorry he's gone. I wish I could have helped him more. I helped him more sooner. R.I.P. my friend. And I talked about this in one of the lives. I suspect that the purpose of that pool party, I think there was a celebratory nature to it because I think that Lori thought that she would be coming into $1 million. But I also suspect that at least some of the intention was to muddy the waters, if you will, just absolutely decimate the crime scene, because we know that Chandler PD never followed up after they talked to him the day of the shooting, but they didn't know that. And so even that little jaunt that they took to the medical center, like I did a live where I took all of the GPS points from the FOIA docs on the day that Charles was shot and mapped it out in a map. And someone pointed out in a comment that the medical center that they went to, it wasn't a center like a hospital, it was like a complex, a medical complex, that Summer's husband, who's a chiropractor, has his office at that complex. So I suspect that they were dumping stuff from Alex's house in the dumpsters at that medical complex because they didn't know if they would come back with a warrant and search Alex's home. So I think there were a lot of things that they just didn't know, and you would have, expected that they would possibly come back and, and even just like, just rope off the home and not let them access the home the same day. So anyway, all right. On July 15th, there are a few things that happened. One of Charles' son sent a text asking why they haven't heard from Colby. So that text is in here. Their entire text exchange, I'm just going to flip through it because, in the interest of time. But if someone wants to read these, of course, you can just pause and read them. Whoops, I went through that last one kind of fast. And yeah, there were quite a few because these are people taking screenshots of mobile devices. I don't even know how many there are. Okay. I don't know. I might be just cycling through. Usually you get to the end, but okay. On that same day, Cole Vallow and Cheryl Wheeler, who was Charles' second wife, they flew to Phoenix to meet with Chandler police. And so we know that because of the FOIA docs, including this email from Cole to Detective Moffat, and it's just talking about their plans to fly in. And on the same day, on the 15th, so they were basically like two ships passing in the night, Colby and Lori flew to Houston and they went through Charles' home. So we know that they removed possessions from Charles' home. And Colby said that he kept the iMac, Charles' truck, and JJ's service dog, Bailey. We don't know that that's a comprehensive list. What we do know is that they loaded up Charles' truck. He had a Ford F-150. Ironically, so did Alex, and they both had silver Ford 150s. So they loaded up the truck. They got Bailey from the kennel, and Colby and Lori flew back to Phoenix, and Lori left the keys in the glove box along, no, I'm sure she gave the keys to Alex, but she left money in the glove box. Alex flew out to Houston, picked up the truck, and drove it back. Okay, so one thing that was notable for me, I'm going to pick up that one screenshot again. I think it was in this last paragraph. And sometimes some of these nuggets are kind of hidden, they're buried in these FOIA docs. But okay. Colby stated that while they were in Texas, Lori was on Charles' computer. She showed him text messages between Adam and Zach's name fit in there. He recalled that redacted stated that Lori was nuts and shouldn't be on this earth. Colby then began to side with his mother that maybe something was going to happen to her. Colby began to ask her what she was going to do. While Lori was cleaning out a cabinet at Charles' residence, she told him that she was going to be married again soon. Colby indicated that he was surprised by this comment and he snapped at her. He told Lori that she must be nuts and she was not going to introduce Tylee and JJ to another dad. Lori did not discuss this any further. So a little bit later, Colby it seems to be like surprised to find out that she was married. This was in his interview with Dr. Phil. Again, I'm just putting together correlations and where I'm just going to play this snippet here. But just kind of keep in mind, he did have that heads up, and that was only 4 days after Charles was shot.
My wife found some information that they were in Rexburg, and she was married to a guy I never heard of, and that they were looking for the kids, and that they abandoned their house. And that was the start of everything right there.
And again, like I said, we are just going to keep buzzing through. Okay, one of Charles' sons had asked Lori for his dad's watch collection. this was in an article pretty early on. He went by an assumed name. I think at that point he was just very afraid. So he went by the name Steve. Don't let that throw you. Let me just search. Okay. Finally, on July 20th, Steve texted Lori, if you won't answer those questions, can we please have his watches and other stuff he always talked about and had around? Lori responded within an hour and told Steve she would send some items to his house. Now, keep in mind, when this first came out, I was a little surprised that they would think that Lori would have Charles' belongings, because they were already separated, and we knew at that point that Lori had moved to Chandler without Charles. So it felt like not a hit below the belt, but just a little odd. Like, why would his sons, or at least one of his sons, think that she would have had access to his watches? And then, when I found out about this Houston trip, which I've talked about this in other lives, I actually found that out fairly early on, I think maybe mid 2020, through a confidential source. I was like, oh, okay, then that explains why she would have had access. And we don't know if Lori knew that Cheryl and Cole would be in Phoenix at that time. So were Kay and Larry, but it did seem like an opportune moment for them to go. And technically, I don't know, legally, she might have had a right to some of these belongings, because technically they were still married, but ethically, morally, it doesn't make sense. And it especially doesn't make sense how Colby would have felt entitled to, especially some of these bigger ticket items. Okay. Let's see. Lori responded within an hour and told Steve she would send some items to his house. That was the last communication he had with his stepmother. My dad had a collection of watches, very fancy watches. He wore nice watches for years, and that I'm saying this, I'm not reading it. I can attest to that. So he wore nice watches for years and years. So I thought she was going to send me some of them, Steve says. The package arrived, and inside were 2 cheap Timex watches you'd find at CVS. Anything that was worth money, we didn't get. I'm assuming she sold everything else. Okay. All right. So July, just noting that from July 29th to the 31st, Lori, Alex, and Melanie went on a vacation to Oceanside, California. The next day, again, these are just correlations. I'm not saying that she or Tylee sent Colby a Venmo because of it. I'm just saying that they correlate. Okay. So August 4th, this was Tylee's last Snapchat post. So it kind of looks like when their lives became really chaotic, Tylee pulled back from Snapchat. Either that, or possibly Lori, when she had access to Tylee's phone, deleted some of her Snapchats. We just don't know. Around this time, you can see that Lori and Melanie, they were going all in on their podcast. They published a podcast titled "What is a Baptism of Fire?" So this is a little bit more than a month before we know that Tylee was murdered, and we know that her remains were being burned in a fire pit. Excuse me. Oh, thank you, Jeanette. Gosh, I thought I hit the. Um, okay. I dropped a comment in the chat that I am unmuted now. There's just a minute delay. So sorry about that. Okay. I don't know what I last covered. I think, oh yeah, I was just talking about the what is a baptism of fire. Okay, now my mods are all calling me because they're awesome. I really appreciate them letting me know so soon. Okay, so she traded in the Infinity for a Nissan Rogue. This does come into play. She also put Bailey up for sale. So she had given Colby Bailey, and we don't know why she would have done that, why Colby would have agreed to that, because I've talked about how JJ was very attached to Bailey. The Woodcocks have also talked about that, so I'm not going to go too much into that. But as soon as Colby returned Bailey, because Bailey was too big for their apartment, Lori put him up for sale. And the trainer caught the listing. I do actually include the verbiage, like what the ad said, because I caught that before it went up in smoke. So you can read that if you want. But the trainer caught it and said, "Hey, the company that they got Bailey from said you can't sell this dog. You can return Bailey," and she did that right before they moved to Ruxburg. Okay, so on August 11th, this was when Lori told Chad to go back with his family. Talk about passive aggressive. I believe she was also upping the ante. But it says during August, it appeared that Chad and Lori were having a difficult time carrying on their relationship while Chad was still married. On August 11th at 21:15, Lori sent Chad the following message: "You should give all of this should have been your love and your attention to your wife and family. I'm just a distraction. Go have fun with your family. I really do want you to. I just can't be in the way anymore. If things change, we can talk, but we have nothing until things change anyway." This was, I believe, pretty clearly an ultimatum. The next day, Lori met with Social Security. Then Lori screenshots. Now, again, these aren't correlating that closely with, well, no, it does. Anyway, so I'm just going to keep going. Lori screenshots wedding rings on Etsy. So she had taken a screenshot on August 14th. These rings were also malachite. and they're similar to the rings that they ultimately bought. The person who was going to make them just didn't have time with school and returned their money. One thing that I think I just caught for the first time was it was in my my timeline. I just didn't really put two and two together, even though I did record the date. But she sent a screenshot to her niece, Melanie. And it says here, Lori even sent Melanie photographs of Malachite wedding ring on 8/14. So this is before she bought them, because she bought them the next day. This was prior to the death of Tammy Daybell, and are the type of rings worn by Lori and Chad when they were married. Now, another thing to keep in mind with the original Malachite stone that she took a screenshot of, that was before either Charles or Tammy were dead. So clearly they were planning this for quite a while. But anyway, this kind of takes away, not kind of, this takes away some of Melanie's, any kind of deniability. She knew what was up. At minimum, she believed these predictions that conveniently Tammy was going to die, and I believe that worked well for her, because they were also predicting that Brandon would die. Then the next day, Lori actually buys the Malachite wedding rings. Oh, this was the other thing that I never caught before, because I think two of the screenshots only reference one ring. I don't know why this is happening, but I created these screenshots exactly the same, so I don't know why some of them aren't working. But but she ordered two rings, because one was a size 4 and the other one was a size 11. In the original FOIA doc that we had, they didn't have a breakdown of the actual receipt, and unfortunately that's the one that isn't opening. I actually wonder if it's catching the parenthesis. Nope. Okay. Yeah, Bitly's just blocking some of them. All right. But I think I'll go back through. If you're in Cool Cats, I'll go back through and grab some of these and just drop them in a post. Or I'll drop the full link in. Okay. Now this here, August 15th, this was the original approximate date that Colby gave Gilbert police for when his mom stopped by his work. So he told them that she came by herself and that she was driving the new car, the Nissan Rogue. And then, I'll just read it. Hopefully this opens. Okay. Let me see here. Yeah, he said it was in the middle of August on a Thursday, and she dropped by to tell him that she was moving. Oops. And let me see where it is here. Oh, Colby estimated in the middle of August on a Thursday, Lori surprised Colby at his place of employment at the Anytime Fitness in Mesa and informed him she was moving. The following day, on Friday, Lori again arrived to go say goodbye to Colby. Colby said this time, and Tylee and JJ fit in there, we're with Lori, and they were all traveling in the blue Nissan Rogue. Lori did not tell Colby where she was moving to and told him it was for his own protection. Okay. But now one thing that's not very clear is he also said that he told Justin Lum that he found out from detectives that his mom had moved to Rexburg. So I'm just going to play this.
At what point do you find out that they're going to Idaho? I didn't know they were going to Idaho. I found out that they were in Idaho recently. That's where they were. Detectives come and ask you where the kids are. Mm-hmm. That's how you find out. Yeah. What happened?
Okay, so there were these screenshots in one of the FOIA docs that said Colby stated Tylee was, let me see. Yeah, he stated neither of the kids were in his care and expressed concern for their well-being. Colby said the last time he observed, JJ and Tylee occurred during a FaceTime video call on 8/30/2019. Colby stated Tylee was babysitting Joshua and speaking from the dining room table of their new home he believed to be in Rexburg, Idaho. And then he goes on to say, at that time, he has not spoken to or seen Tylee, et cetera, et cetera. Now, we know now that they weren't in Rexburg. There is a question mark, because they don't release the family interviews. They did with one of Kay and Larry's, but for most of the family members, they only gave us like these summary notes, and they're pretty cursory. Like they don't go into a lot of detail. I imagine after the trial, they'll release more of this, and we'll also find out more in the trial. But at minimum, Colby would have recognized the dining room, would have most likely recognized the dining room. Well, no, he definitely would have recognized the dining room in Chandler because he had been in that home. So there is a disconnect there that at minimum, clearly their home in Rexburg was much, much smaller, but it's kind of a moot point because we know now that when Tylee and JJ talked to him in that FaceTime video call, they were still in Chandler. So again, a disconnect. Excuse me. Okay. And then also Colby later said that his mom and the kid stopped by on August 30th. I think, yeah, that one I actually go. Okay. So this was the updated date that Colby said Lori and the kids stopped by. So when he interviewed, so he told Gilbert police that they came by in mid-August and that they said goodbye. Well, now we know that they were there for longer. And now there's a little bit more of a disconnect because now when everything went public and he interviewed with Justin Lum, he said that they stopped by on August 30th. This time, they were driving the Jeep, not the Nissan Rogue. That's not necessarily consequential, but it is significant that in this story, they only came by once, and it was Lori and the kids together. So also, let me see if there's... Oh, shoot. I moved that one. Okay. Oh, I know what I did. In another point, I combined two screenshots. Okay. Colby also said he didn't know if they were leaving Arizona.
Were you actually kind of relieved that she was moving to start Fresh?
Yeah, I mean, for them, I was. For the kids, I was like, they need to be out of the house that happened in. And I didn't know if she was going to leave Arizona, but I knew that they needed to get out of that situation and just try to be in a new environment.
But then on Dateline, he said something that seems to suggest something different. Okay, let's just listen.
7 weeks after the shooting, on August 30th, 2019, Lori dropped by son Colby's house to tell him she, Tylee, and JJ were moving.
I'm thinking, okay, well, they'll just move houses. Because I was like, why would you want to stay in the house? Just honestly, like, sure. That's a horrible place for all, like a horrible memory for you. And you should move.
Colby thought his mom was moving the family to another neighborhood, perhaps.
Or somewhere near us, right?
But that wasn't Lori's plan at all.
She's like, I'm moving somewhere cold, and I can't really tell you where I'm going right now. I just kind of wanted out.
So, in a way, he was glad to see his mom drive off.
Okay, so again, just pointing out these discrepancies. I mean, technically, there are some areas in Arizona that do get cold, but I don't think that would be the natural assumption. Like, because if she had said, I can't tell you where I'm moving, just that it's someplace cold, that would seem to suggest that it probably wasn't going to be in Arizona again. All right. So backing up, I wanted to cover those two things together. Let me see here. There is another thing I'm going to cover about the FaceTime call. So Colby had told Justin that they hadn't moved yet, that we've already covered. But he told Dr. Phil that they, meaning the kids, seemed normal, that they were just living their normal lives. Hopefully this opens. This wasn't. Oh, this is the wrong one. So, yeah. If someone reminds me, I'll drop that in Cool Cats. Well, no, I'll just, if someone reminds me, if one of my mods can take notes of things that I need to update. This was, actually, I'm going to, because this is fairly significant. So I just decided to follow this format a couple of days ago. So I've been kind of burning the midnight oil. All right, I'm going to stop sharing my screen. Okay. And I'm going to quickly try to find this. Okay. And
Okay, so you were FaceTiming up until when?
August 30th was the last time I saw her and JJ together.
Okay, and that was on FaceTime?
Yeah.
How did they sound?
They were normal, and that was the thing. Like, it didn't seem like anything crazy. They were just trying to, live their normal lives, and we just were talking like normal. And
Just yucking it up,
yeah, exactly.
Chatting and
exactly.
and all.
Having a normal conversation.
some of these, I jacked the audio up as high as I could, but you'll also be able to play it. Okay. So the fact that he says, they were just living their normal lives, Dr. Phil added in the, yucking it up. But we know now, because they moved the next day, that this just wouldn't have been them just like living their normal lives. I think there would have been a really high level of chaos, because on this same day, um, on the next day, JJ parted with Bailey. And that might have actually been the 30th. Now that I think about, yeah. So that was actually August 30th. So I think the fact that JJ would have, I'll show that for the dog was picked up on August 30th. Um, the the fact that that JJ would have just parted with Bailey, I think would have been very just traumatic. I think it also would have been traumatic for Tylee, because what would have been a good reason to get rid of Bailey? I mean, I live in a city and I see dogs. Like I mean, you live in most of us live in small apartments when you live in this area, and I see dogs bigger than golden doodles all the time, and I see golden doodles, and so just even, and the apartment they had in Rexburg was still bigger than most, New York apartments. So it's not like this just would have been a foregone conclusion that, well, they're moving into, and it's actually kind of more of a townhouse than an apartment, but they're called apartments, so we'll go with that. And they are small, but I think it would have been extremely upsetting to both Tylee and JJ, because even though this was JJ's dog, it was still a family pet. And and Bailey was like in and out of the house, and I think it also would have spoken to Tylee's fear of, like, just a month earlier Charles was murdered and Tylee knew the truth. And now they're moving to Rexburg. Tylee's already been called a zombie. She's very intelligent, and so she had to be, well, not had to be, but she was quite possibly worried about if she and JJ were both going to be targets, because Lori has a tendency to tell on herself. Well, all right. So backing up, so now we're in between the time that Colby originally said that Lori and the kids stopped by his work, and the time that his updated story was. And on August 20th to the 25th, Lori was in Rexburg, and she used the name Ryan when she traveled there. So we also know that she took pictures of Kennedy Elementary, which was JJ's future school, and BYU. Oh, okay. All right. I just can't use bit.ly links in the future. All right. So, and at that same time that she was there, so you can see this bar represents anytime there was something that's stretch out over a period of days, you'll see this blue bar. And you see that while Lori was in Rexburg, she sent, or either she or Tylee sent Colby a Venmo transfer. Again, I'm not going to keep qualifying. It may or may not be related. I'm only showing correlations. So, okay. All right. The 31st, that was when they actually moved to Rexburg. Here is the reference. August 31st, Alex and Lori leave for Rexburg. This was kind of interesting, or Zion, as Lori refers to in her text message. So I didn't remember seeing that, but all right. All right. So then September 7th, this was Tylee's last Instagram post. And here's the source for this. You can read through this. Okay. Her last Instagram post was from 9/7. Now, it was interesting that when we were in that first group, I had an interaction, a very brief interaction with Kelsey, and she had said that Lori had told them that she had taken away Tylee's, uh, I forget if she said phone, but also her social media. And so people were saying, "Oh, that's really common, with Mormon homes." Because my response was, that is outside the realm of possibility. Like, that was just not their dynamic. So I had a lot of people, this was early on, and people were saying, I think Colby and Kelsey know Tylee better than you do, which is certainly true. But that was part of my concern. Like, well, yes, exactly. They do know Tylee better than I do. And so they would know that that's just not conceivable. Like, Tylee was already living mostly as an adult when I was there, and she was 15. She woke up when she wanted to. She didn't have a car yet at that time, but um, she had her license, and she came and went as she pleased. I think she had her permit, but their dynamic. I've talked about this. It was really, in some ways, kind of like a role reversal. Like, Tylee corrected Lori way more than Lori ever corrected Tylee. I don't remember Lori ever correcting Tylee. So Tylee had the much stronger personality. But at that point, Tylee had her GED and she had a car, meaning at the point that they moved to Rexburg, she had her GED and had her own car and was supposedly in school. And we know that because we know that Colby was told that she was in school, because that was one of the reasons that he gives for why Tylee wasn't responding. Like, she wasn't picking up the phone or returning his phone calls. He said that he was concerned. So he asked Lori about it, and she said that Tylee was just busy with school. Now, for anyone who has been in college, first of all, I don't think it should have been believable that Tylee would have been able to go from having a GED to getting into BYU. It's a pretty competitive school. But there were lots of issues with that story. But let's suspend reality for a moment and say that Colby and Kelsey believed that Tylee was at BYU. How would she meaning Lori, how would she possibly be able to take away all of these things? Like, Tylee would have had access to technology in school. So, okay. All right. So now this was interesting. So on September 7th, this was one of the days that Lori accessed JJ's old school app. So this was from Life Academy, and Lori had this weird habit of checking JJ's app. So she was logging in as if she was still a parent. But one thing that I noticed was that during the time that Lori was sending Colby Venmos, so the last one was sent the day before the case went public, but that we know of. But during the time where Lori was sending Colby Venmos, anytime she checked JJ's app, she would send Colby a Venmo within a day. So she checked JJ's app on September 7th. She sent Colby a Venmo. She checked the app on November 21st. She sent Colby a Venmo either she or, obviously at this point, it not on September 7th. I do suspect that, yeah, there wasn't there wasn't anything in Tylee's Venmo about a Venmo transaction on the 7th. So I suspect this was from Lori. But again, there are a lot of unknowns with Venmo, like if this had been set to private. But we know that with both of these that, Tylee was dead. But I just thought it was interesting that, and I don't think that this suggests anything on Colby's part. It's almost like this, it's suggestive of something possibly going on internally inside Lori's own chaotic mind. That whatever was getting under her skin or causing her to, have this well-worn path of opening up JJ's school app, whether it was sentimentality or paranoia or looking for some kind of advantage, she would send Colby a Venmo. And then on December 9th, again, she checks JJ's school app, and also, we know that these would have been most likely Lori. It was someone in control of Lori and Tylee's phone. So, and then a Venmo was sent to Colby. So it may mean absolutely nothing. I just thought it was a curious trend that I don't know. I think because I was dealing with all of these dates, it just kind of jumped out at me. Okay. So September 15th. So, sorry. Tylee was last seen alive on September 8th and was allegedly buried on Chad's property on September 9th. And we also see this is a pattern with both Tylee and JJ's murders. Lori sends Colby Venmos. Again, I think that this is more indicative of just something internally going on inside Lori's mind. So it most likely, I would suspect it was just her own paranoia. Because at this point, this was at least her second and third murders that she was allegedly somehow involved in. And so I think the paranoia was pretty compelling. But you see that a Venmo was sent on September 8th, and then so that's the last day Tylee was seen alive. And then on September 10th, which was clearly after Tylee was already murdered and allegedly buried on Chad's property. Okay, September 15th through the 17th, Zulema visits Lori in Rexburg. We know that from this screenshot of these are just a bunch of text messages being exchanged between Zulema and Lori. And Zulema says, "So excited to see you today. We have been there 2 times to bless you." They really don't want you to come here. It's so important. Sorry. This was Lori. Yeah. When it says red, it's Lori. And so she's telling Zulema, "So excited to see you today." So that marks that this was Zulema arrived on the 15th. And then Zulema said, "It was very powerful in the temple today. It was so much fun to be with all of you this weekend. Now I just have to wait until the Lord says it's time for me to go." This is also part of the reason I don't believe that Zulema had planned to move into Chad's home with Alex. That was just a theory proposed by Julie Holden with Hidden True Crime. I think, the Coxes are warm weather people, and I think Alex was pretty set on being back in Arizona, and Zulema never received this word from God that she was supposed to move. And she does also have text messages to Chad and Lori expressing at times her consternation over, like, she just didn't feel released to move. Okay. Kay told Detective Moffat that they found Charles' truck at Colby's. So this was on September 17th. So they had been trying to track down Charles' truck. So it seems to suggest there was an open communication that Lori had intended on taking Charles' truck and giving it to Colby. But there have been accounts that the truck was ultimately repossessed. Okay. All right. Then, as we know, Melanie visits Rexburg. This one is a day off. When I created these, the fastest way to create them was to create a duplicate and then adjust the dates. I apologize. I forgot to adjust the date on this one. He came a day later, so this should actually say September 20th to the 23rd. And the day before they left was the day JJ was last seen alive, September 22nd, and Lori sent Colby a Venmo. Then JJ is allegedly buried on Chad's property on the 23rd, and on the 23rd, Lori sent Colby a Venmo. On the 28th, this is when Colby asked Tylee to call. So Colby told Dr. Phil her text didn't sound like her. So keep in mind, this is September, and he said that her text didn't sound like her. This was someone from the Dr. Phil show actually asked if there was any questions that they would like for me to ask Dr. Phil. And this was one of them, was when did Colby start to feel like that the text messages that he was receiving didn't sound like her, because he had told Justin Lum that it was later in October. And let me see if I think I might have that in here. Previously, Colby told Justin Lum that he didn't become suspicious that Tylee's text didn't sound like her until later in October. I'm just going to play these.
We weren't really calling each other. I was texting Tylee while she was gone, checking on her. You know, there was a point in 2018 where we kind of started a mentoring together, where I was trying to help her make sure she could process her emotions through everything. So I was kind of like that, do you want to talk today? Do you have anything you need to talk to? So it's just normal conversations, and I was getting texted back. So it just seemed like, you would never even think twice about a text coming back.
In September.
Yes.
At what point do you think, is this Tylee? Is this weird? Or tell me about that. Or did you think that at all?
Later in October, that's when it actually really felt weird.
So here he says that in September he wasn't concerned that it, that it sounded like Tylee, and it wasn't until later in October when he talked to Dr. Phil. Okay, good, it did come up. He said that it was around this time. So let's just listen to that.
Now, you say the last communication with Tylee were texts, and you say they didn't sound like her.
When she started texting me back a couple of weeks after we had FaceTime, it just started not sounding right, different, exclamations, and just the way she spoke didn't fit her personality.
Okay, so you were FaceTiming up until when?
August 30th was the last time I saw her and JJ together.
Okay, and that was on FaceTime?
Yeah.
How did they sound?
They were normal, and that was the thing. It didn't seem like anything crazy. They were just trying to, live their normal lives, and we just were talking like normal, and
just yucking it up,
exactly.
Chatting and all.
Having a normal conversation.
All right. Well, here's a text exchange between you and Tylee's phone number, at least, and this was on September 28th of 19, which would be 4 weeks after you last saw them on FaceTime. And Colby, you say, "Hey Ty, happy birthday! I'm so proud of you. I know you have been through a lot. trust God, it's all going to be okay. Then Tylee says, thanks, Colbs, I love you.
She's usually using emojis. So that's kind of the one thing that you can already tell, like, it seems, and it's really quick response.
And so you say, hey, Ty, are you okay? She says, I'm good, just tired. Call you back later, love you. And you say, okay, call me tonight, please. At the movie, I'll call you after. And you say, Ty, please call me after your movie. I'm worried about you. And she says, worried about me? What? I just want to hear you talk. Okay, this week was just busy. I'll call you soon. And you're saying this is not the kind of banter you have with her.
Yeah, and the fact that,
okay, this week was just busy.
I just want to point out that Colby, he didn't read the last one, but it says, okay, please call me tonight if you can.
I'll call you soon. And you're saying this is not the kind of banter you have with her.
Yeah, and the fact that this week is busy, like, what does that have to do with right now? And I just tried to push her a little bit just to get her to call me. It didn't seem like a difficult task. It was so, like, you know, push me away. Every time I asked her to call me, just push her to the side. I'm busy. And that doesn't make sense.
So this is not her.
Yeah, exactly.
It's not your relationship.
It's not a relationship, exactly.
Okay, so here we definitely get the impression that, you know, within a couple weeks, and I'm not going to pin him down to like 14 days, but definitely in the month of September, he became suspicious of her texts. He became suspicious of her not calling him back, of having excuses that she was, you know, too busy, and oh, there was a let's see. Oh, yeah, there was this quote from Dateline where this text isn't referenced with Dr. Phil. So I'm going to just play this. Hopefully this opens.
Her feelings over the wedding were nothing compared to his anxiety about Tylee and JJ. His mother wouldn't even let him know where they were living. And he could never get a return call from Tylee.
I just blew up at one night and I just had to text her and be like, can you please just call me? Please, just like, I want to hear your voice. 10 seconds.
No call, nothing.
So the 10 seconds really kind of resonated with me because, like, we will tell people, like, when they try to join Cool Cats, if their account is locked down or they look like a potential sock puppets, like, we actually tell them, hey, listen, we're going to have to do a video call. It's not to violate anyone's privacy. It's just, but I'll tell them it takes less than 10 seconds, you know. So when you're sending a message like that, it's like you're clearly letting the person know, listen, I'm not looking to, like, hang out, you know, like, we're not going to, like, be on FaceTime while you know, we go to a coffee shop. Like, it's just 10 seconds or less. You really just want to verify that this person is alive. And I actually went through this with a friend of one of my daughters just a few months ago. She had gone dark, and she had been in an abusive relationship, and we were very worried because this relationship had gone south, and she was trying to move back to her country with her daughter. And anyway, I was so proud of my daughter because after, like, I don't know, a week maybe of not hearing back from this friend, she messaged the friend and said, I need to see your face today or I'm calling in a welfare check. And then her friend you know, got on a messenger video call with her. So, you know, so you just do this when you're clearly concerned. So even just the fact that he was like, I just need 10 seconds, and we don't know when that was, but clearly he was very concerned. Okay. But then he told detectives when they came to his apartment on November 27th, so this was for the welfare check for Tylee, that her texts had just recently become shorter and delayed. So here it kind of sounds more like he may have not have become suspicious until like right before the welfare check. So Detective McDermott and I responded to Colby's address to confirm if this is Tylee was there as Brandon suggested. And I talked about that in another live. I was very surprised to find out that Brandon was the one who gave the tip that Tylee could be with Colby. That's why they did the welfare check for Tylee. Colby was contacted and interviewed. Yada, yada, yada. Again, the FaceTime call. Colby said they were in Rexburg, Idaho at their new residence. Since that, and again, this is another weird, I look forward to actually seeing the video because both of these detectives referenced this as if like Colby was telling them that they were in Rexburg. So anyway, question marks there. Since that FaceTime call, Colby only communicated with Tylee via text message. I should say, anytime I fill in a redaction, take it for what it's worth. These I actually did fill in, but sometimes I grabbed the screenshots before I went in and actually unredacted names. But clearly, they're talking about Tylee here. So Colby only communicated with Tylee via text message. Colby said Tylee's messages and content recently became delayed and shorter. Colby was concerned for Tylee, so he reached out to his mother, Lori. Lori assured Colby that Tylee was fine and unable to communicate because of school. So she doesn't say here, it's because I took her phone and her social media away. It was because she's in school. But even students who are in very demanding programs, obviously, they're still on social media and they're still texting and calling. Colby was still concerned, but believed his mother. Per our request, Colby agreed to contact. Now, this is important. Tuck this away. Per our request, Colby agreed to contact police if Lori reached out to him. Detective McDermott and I provided our business cards and left Colby's residence. That is actually a very important point that will come into play. All right. So on October 1st, we know that Lori opened up the storage unit in Rexburg, and Brandon and Melanie closed on their home. You can check that out if you are so inclined. It's somewhere in here. Oh, yeah, they closed on the residence on October 1st. Okay. And then there was a Venmo transfer. Again, doesn't mean that it correlates. I'm not going to keep saying that. Okay. October 2nd, on the same day that Brandon was shot at, Lori ordered wedding rings. These are the rings that they actually bought and used. Okay. And then this was just a weird, curious point. There's a record that Alex called and transferred money to a Hispanic female. I think it's probably safe to assume that this Hispanic female was Zulema. And I think at one point I saw another reference in the FOIA docs that hinted at this being Zulema. I don't remember. You can, I'll just open them. Hopefully they all open. And that way, if I can't share the timeline, you can at least pause if you are interested in chasing these down. Okay. So, but if that was Zulema, that is a very curious point. Like, it might have been unrelated. I don't. I would tend to think that if it's noted in a police report, it was probably a fairly significant amount. Thank you, Jeanette. That time I must have bumped the pause button. Okay, I just dropped a note in the chat. Can someone let me know when it paused? Did I cover, because this was an accidental bump. Yeah, Julie, I see it. Had I already talked about Tammy being shot at and the transfer of money to a Hispanic female? I'm just looking for a comment. So if someone could reply, I just don't want to go through all of that. Just a yay or nay. Okay. Oh, two people said no. Someone said Hispanic female, yes. And someone said, wait, yes. Okay. So on October 2nd, the day that Brandon was shot at, the FBI agent noted that Alex made a transfer to a Hispanic female. And this was the same Hispanic female that he talked to at the time of the shooting. And so it is a curious point. Like, why would Alex have been transferring money to Zulema? I kind of doubt that he didn't have a Venmo account. And I kind of doubt that it would be in a police report if it hadn't been a significant amount. So that's just something to, kind of watch out for. Okay. Tammy reports being shot at. This was on October 9th. And we know that on October 8th, Lori was with Melanie in Phoenix. You can check these out. It's just so strange to me how most of these work fine, but then some just don't work at all. Okay, so, and this is just a copy of one Lori Ryan's boarding pass, I think. Okay, and then Lori and Melanie allegedly were in Missouri. I say allegedly because we don't have exact dates. Lori was starting to become more technically savvy, and she was deleting more things. But there are some indicators, and also I had a confidential source long before any of this come out. And when I say that, I don't say that as a humble brag. I never mean it as a humble brag. It's to make the point that I knew from this person. Well, I shouldn't say I knew. This person told me that Lori and Melanie had gone to Missouri and that they had also gone to Hawaii. So anyway, so there's a point here, and you can read this if you are so inclined. And this is another reference. So, but here we have, and again, this most likely is not, oh yeah, no, Tylee was gone at this time. This is October 10th. This, I think, is very suspicious that, okay, we don't know what this Venmo transaction said, but this one says, we love you. And we know that Tylee was much more inclined to use emojis. And I'm not even a teenager, and I very rarely ever write anything in Venmo. It's an emoji game. So it's emojis and stickers, so I'll write just enough to get the sticker. And then if I could, I would delete the text and just keep the sticker. But they have just kind of a weird rule around that. But most people are using emojis and stickers. And I don't even know if they had stickers in the earlier days. But so I think this is kind of like what Colby was talking about, where things would be written out that Tylee would normally use a sticker for. Well, at this point now it's October 10th, and we know that Colby was concerned that text messages were not sounding like Tylee as early as mid-September, and he insisted on talking to Tylee, but then obviously he didn't call in a welfare check. But I think at this point, suspicion would have been at pretty much a zenith point, because even if Lori had told him, I can't tell you where we're moving for your own protection, and all I can tell you is that it's someplace cold, I would think that would make you even more on high alert. And I've talked about this before, but like, I called in a welfare check on one of my kids when she was in college, because I think it was like maybe 3 or 4 days. It was quite a while ago now, but she had an iPhone and all of her texts were going through green. And when I would call her, everything was going straight to voicemail. And I didn't have her. I think they had just recently moved, and I didn't have her roommates. I had their first names, but I didn't have their last names, and I didn't have their phone numbers. So I didn't have anyone I could call. So I think it was the end of day 3, maybe. I don't know. But it was pretty far. It was long enough in my mind. I was just like, nope, I watched enough Dateline. I'm just calling in a welfare check. And that's how I know, like, you don't have to justify a welfare check. Anyone can call one in. And they even asked me if I wanted to remain anonymous. So that's how I found out that you could remain anonymous in a welfare check. And, police went to, it was campus police, went to her apartment, and she answered the door, and they were like, she had to prove she was who I said she was. And they were like, call your mother. And she had, I think her phone broke, and she just didn't think to like let anyone know that that her phone was broken. But anyway, so I'm just making the point of, I think at this point we don't know what was going on in Colby's mind, and I don't pretend to understand growing up the way he did with Lori. And that's part of the reason I started this live, with the fact that she would exploit his financial, kind of dire straits that he was in, is unconscionable. But something was going on, and that I think was holding him back from taking action. And I've talked about this in other lives. It's definitely a solid Cox family tradition to make sure you have dirt on everyone to ensure silence. And I thought it was interesting, even in this document that I'm reading, that Lori's attorney at that time said that there was a note. Someone had made a note. I shouldn't say her attorney said something. Someone noted that her attorney said he was going to call me and he was going to record the call. And so I think that's just in their, I don't know, it's in the fabric of how their family works. And I think that it is most likely part, and I'm not suggesting that Colby, did anything illegal. I've never suggested that. I'm just saying that it is in the Cox family tradition to use intimidation techniques like this. So, okay. And this was another Venmo from Tylee to Colby on October 16th. And this was a red heart. In the very first memo that Tylee sent Colby, she used a red heart. That was in 2018. I think like November 2018. I showed it early on. Ever since then, she always used orange hearts, so like people who know me well know, like if they suddenly started receiving text messages and red hearts everywhere, or pink heart, because like anyone who knows me well knows that I just don't care for the color pink, they would know, like, wait a minute, something's up. But okay. And what else? Okay, so Lori, Melanie, allegedly in Missouri. Of course, we've already talked about this. Lori makes sure she, leaves the scene before something sketchy goes down. Now, in this case, it was unsuccessful. I believe that Alex failed in his mission to shoot Tammy. We also know that there was a reference that Nate Eaton had made, and I saw one time Janice and I were digging into like the little bit of video footage that we have of people going in and out of this storage unit. There was Nate had made the point that there were firearms. There was a case, like a gun case, that was taken into the storage unit and later retrieved. So if that's the case, and there was something that looked like it could be a gun case, excuse me. And so if so, that might account for why Alex's gun misfired, if that's why it didn't work. And someone I know who knows a lot about guns had also said that when you add attachments to a gun, that can also make the gun more likely to misfire. Okay, let me get a drink. All right. And so now Melanie tells Brandon she's moving to Boise with or without her kids. I'll just open that up very quickly. And there was a lot going on between Melanie and Brandon. So this was on October 14th. There was also a Venmo transfer on that day. The next day, Brandon called Gilbert police and said he's not returning the kids to Melanie. So the next day, the 16th, was supposed to be her day. So he was just giving them a heads up that Melanie had said she's moving to Boise. And it was a very strange like text exchange. And I mean, she was just like, like, either you can take the kids and I can provide, childcare, or the other way around. I mean, it was very, very strange. So I understand Brandon's concern, but he also, I'm sure, didn't want to be arrested for custodial interference. So he gave them this heads up. The next day, on Melanie's day, the 16th, she tried to pick the kids up early from school and found out that Brandon did not take them to school that day. So there was a lot going on between Melanie and Brandon, and there were these two Venmo transactions. Again, may or may not be related. A lot of this we will unfortunately find out in the trial. Excuse me. And the techniques that I use to or have used to find this information, this is brute force. This is all manual. I'm going through, I'm reading these things manually. I've created the dashboard. I add things to the timeline. I create screenshots. It's all a very, very manual process. But law enforcement more and more is moving toward AI, artificial intelligence, and machine learning. And it's part of the reason I'm actually in a data science program to learn AI and machine learning, so that it's not as manual. So when I have access to these files, I plan to data science the crap out of them. But all that to say, I mean, even farmers are using AI and machine learning. So with AI and machine learning, like, you are able, even with tools that are fairly affordable, like IBM, I think it's called Watson. Like, I went to a demo because I used to be, I don't know, an IBM influencer. That was kind of weird. I just went to a conference, but I saw this amazing demo, and like, they can consume, like, using AI, they're able to consume the equivalent, I think they said, of like an average public library in less than an hour. I mean, it is insanely fast, and it is insanely accurate. I mean, you rely on data science to like train the data scientists, excuse me, to train the programs. So it's not all automatic, but with these tools, like law enforcement, more and more, they're able to take an entire corpus of evidence, so video, all of these like documents, these paper documents. This is all called unstructured data. It's just, it has information, it has data, but it's totally unstructured. And you can use AI and machine learning, process all of it. And from an entire case file, even one that I think Rob Wood said it was at something like 18,000 pages when I had talked to him, and he said that it was okay to share it. So I'm not sharing anything that wasn't okay. But the point is, this is a very, very large case. This case file is burgeoning, and with AI and machine learning, they're able to process everything and then be able to use a database and use like a UI, so some kind of user interface, and do a search across everything, like find out every reference to Tylee, to zombies, to Malachite, to Colby, to bloodstain, I mean, whatever it is. And so what I'm doing is like a drop in, it's a drop in the ocean compared to what law enforcement is moving toward more and more. And not even just law enforcement, like even veterans associations, like they're using AI to predict when vets are suicidal. I mean, it's unreal, like what organizations can use AI and machine learning for. But we will see it used more and more with law enforcement, especially high visibility cases like this. So my point here is, like, this might look like I'm like dogging on Colby. I am not. I can't convince anyone of that, but this is nothing compared to what some of these people, and not just Colby, anyone who maybe has contradictions in their story. I strongly urge them to work out these contradictions ahead of time, because right now you're talking to police, you're not under oath. It's it's a question of ethics, integrity, but you're not like lying under oath or anything like that. But some of these people who may have things to hide, I strongly recommend that they not take it in, work out some of these contradictions and before they're under oath. Okay. All right. So Tammy dies. We already know Lori and Melanie were, reportedly in Hawaii. I already opened those. At this same time that Lori and Melanie were, reportedly in Hawaii, Colby and Kelsey posted that they were in Disneyland. It was their daughter's first trip to Disneyland. So this is, October 21st. We don't know the dates that they were there, only that they posted on that day. But we see Venmo transactions all around, this trip. So you see, one here, and two on this particular date. And so, I've talked about this before. This could have been, this could have been any number of possibilities. All we know is that there were 2 Venmo transactions and then another one on the 27th. Then Tammy was buried in Spring Creek, Idaho on the 22nd, and then had her memorial service on the 23rd in Rexburg. And what was interesting was that after, I use the word interesting somewhat loosely, but disturbing, was Lori booked her flight to return home on October 20th. So this was the day after Tammy died. Lori's like, okay, all right, it's safe to book my flight. But I think she purposely picked the 24th, at least I suspect, so that she wasn't there for the memorial service. She came in after the memorial service. So that disproves that whole rumor that Lori had Chad's kids over for cookies. I know that someone had a pretty reliable source even before we knew about these dates, that was not accurate. Okay, then on the 25th, Melanie's apartment was taken off the market. I made this point in another live, but the fact that Lori and Melanie left on the 17th for Hawaii, again, allegedly, reportedly, I don't think that Melanie is confirmed in the FOIA docs as having been there. Again, that was a private source. But then also when I was in that first group, someone called me out, and this was the early wild days of the anyway. It was in the early days of following the case, and someone called me out and said that she saw a picture of me with Lori and Melanie then Boudreaux in Hawaii. So it was very, very funny, but I was like, oh, okay, good to know. At some point, Melanie and Lori were in Hawaii, but this person seemed quite convinced that she had me on the run. Okay, then we know that an unidentified woman is seen approaching Lori's apartment. I'll just open that up. This was a tweet by Garna. This was this woman was running up to Lori's apartment, and she just happens to be thin like Summer and sounds like Summer and appears to be a brunette like Summer, but we don't actually know who this person is. But just noting that this happened at the same time. And then we know on the 31st, Melanie and Alex traveled to Phoenix to pack Melanie up. And on the same day, oh my gosh, it sounds like a helicopter is going to land on my building. The same day, Lori and Chad inquire about rental homes. So there's a lot going on. They flew to Phoenix. I'm not going to open these up. This is pretty standard knowledge at this point. And there was a Venmo transfer on October 31st. We also know that the next day that 2 Rexburg police detectives knocked on Melanie's door asking about Lori. It said 2 detectives knock on Melanie Pulaski's door asking about Lori Vallow. Her account, I'm foggy on this date, but they're referencing Rexburg police. Detective Hermosillo and another gentleman had come to my door while I was moving my stuff in. So it had to be early in November. So they arrived in Rexburg on the 1st. So this would have been November 1st or 2nd. So things are heating up. It's like, okay, well, welcome to Rexburg. Here are 2 detectives knocking on your door. Okay, so now we get to the car issue. I have this bar because Colby said that Lori contacted him in early to middle of November and offered to give him her car. This is the Nissan Rogue. And this concerning the Nissan Rogue, Colby estimated in early to the middle of November 2019, Lori contacted him by telephone and advised him Alexander Cox would be visiting a female friend in Arizona for Thanksgiving. Obviously, this was Zulema. Lori told him Alexander would be driving her Nissan Rogue to Arizona to give to Colby for he and Kelsey to use. They consistently misspell Rogue throughout the entire report. But anyway, I think, I think that's the main point here. So, all right. So the thing to note here is, one, this would have been before detectives came and did the welfare check. And remember, I read that screenshot where the detective said, if you hear from your mom, please contact us. And Colby agreed to do this, to do that, to contact them. Well, he knew when they came to his door, judging by his timeline, they came to his door on the 27th. This is when detectives performed the welfare check for Tylee. And again, this was just a reference to the tip was from Brandon Boudreau. I don't know if it's the same. Yeah, that's the same one. And Colby agreed to contact police if she got in touch with him or she reached out to him. So he already knew at that time that sometime in the beginning to middle of November that Lori was planning on having Alex drive down in her car, and she was going to let them use her car. So there is no indication that Colby let detectives know this. So that's, for me, that was red flag number 1. But then when he actually received the Rogue, which was on the 30th, I'll just read this. So, oh no. Okay. So this one I'm going to open up because this is a PDF. It's a color coded PDF. So let me just find this. All right. I'll share my screen. I did find it, thankfully, pretty quickly. Okay. I'm just going to, because I don't have that same indication that I'm sharing my screen. Yes, I do. Okay. All right. So hopefully you can see my screen. I'm going to go back to the timeline here. Okay, so we're going to touch on the rogue. I'm not seeing my screen, so I'm just going to. Okay, yeah, you do see it. Okay. Okay, so I already covered my analysis of the blood stain. I'm not going to redo all of that, but I am going to cover a few points here. First of all, oh, good. Okay. So what I did was I took the blood stains and I found a picture of the back seat of a Nissan Rogue. This was from the same year as Lori's, and it had this bench seat like Lori's. And so these stains here. So there was a large brown stain on the seatbelt, and that tested positive for blood. All of these tested, everything here, if it has a blood drop, it tested positive for blood. But this large brown stain, there was also a small brown stain. There were two distinct stains at the edge of the east side of the bench, and elsewhere it's referred to as the right or the passenger side. So there were two distinct stains at the edge of the east side of the bench where a passenger would be seated. So somewhere in here. So not on the edge here, because that's not where a passenger would be seated. And there was one stain on the left rear seat. So that's the driver's side. And we know that Colby had the car cleaned. So that was another strike in my book. One, that when he received the car, at some point, it says that, and I need to back up a little bit to cover this, that, oh, yeah, it's in this PDF. And let me reference the color code. Okay. All right. So this is just to kind of give you that 100-foot view. I really like to start with the 100-foot view. The main thing to get from this is that all of these stains were seen on site. They were found just doing a visual inspection of the car. The only one that only became apparent when they applied luminol was the one in the bracket here. Excuse me. And at one point in one of the FOIA docs, or in one of the pages of the FOIA doc, the hypothesis was that the seatbelt, in moving back and forth from this bracket, that the blood most likely transferred. So all of these were visible on site. We also know that Colby had the car cleaned. Let me see what that. Okay, that was blue. So it says here, once Colby came into possession of the Nissan Rogue, he found the interior and exterior of the vehicle to be dirty. Colby said he took the vehicle to a car wash to be clean. Colby recalled the front passenger seat was covered in animal hair. And, I don't follow a lot of the other YouTubers, and that's not like a disavow of them at all. I spend almost all of my time digging into FOIA docs, and there are only so many hours in the day, and I'm in this program, this data science program with my daughter. But anyway, so yeah. Okay. So I saw that there was some discussion about how oh, well, he wasn't getting the car detailed. Like the FOIA docs didn't reference detailing specifically. It just said that he took it in somewhere to have it cleaned. And so I'm not financially strapped like Colby is. I'm not saying that as a humble brag. I'm just making the point, but I am very frugal. So if well, like mostly the only time I had a car detailed or took it in to have someone else clean it, for me, because I am frugal, and Janice knows just how frugal I can be. It can hit kind of a ridiculous point and I think in part because my foster parents grew up during the Great Depression, but and some of those things are just kind of hard to unlearn. But we know that at this time, he was very cash strapped at the time that he acquired the car. You can see all of these Venmo transactions. So, he wouldn't have been in a position to justify taking the car in somewhere just because it had hair from a golden doodle. I mean, you could just take it in and vacuum it. But let's step back from that. And in my opinion, one, he should have let law enforcement know that his mom was planning on giving him the car. He talks about in his interviews, and there are links to some of these interviews, and I make notes because if you are inclined to go through these, you'll be able to do that, hopefully. But he makes the point in these interviews that he was really freaked out, and understandably so, when they came to his door. But there's a disconnect. How are you freaked out? And yet, one, you don't tell law enforcement that your mom is planning on giving you the car. But then when you receive the car, next best thing would have been to let law enforcement know then. You have pangs of conscience. It's November 30th. And it doesn't matter if he thought that the kid's blood might be in this car. I'm talking long before he ever, got in the car. He should have let law enforcement know, hey, you know what? Lori, my mom dropped the car off at Ian's sister's house. Here's the address. You can go and pick up the car. I don't want to, potentially interfere with a potential crime scene. And at that point, it had been several days. His mom had cut off contact. He said that the next day after the welfare check at his apartment. So this was on the 28th. He tried to call his mom and her phone was disconnected. So, I mean, it was one sign after another that this did not bode well. And, he shouldn't have ever gotten into the car. Okay, let's suspend reality and say, all right, he justifies getting in the car as soon as he got home. Let's say that, he was potentially afraid that if his Uncle Alex saw the police come to that house, or Melanie, or, whomever, that, Alex could shoot him. And so let's say he goes and picks up the car. Well, then take it to law enforcement, but or call law enforcement, so that at least there's minimum disturbance to a potential crime scene. But then when he gets in the car, or at least got it home, he would have had to, well, we know that his daughter's car seat was in the car, and typically you put the car seat in the passenger side, the rear passenger side. So when they pulled the seatbelt down, they would have seen a large brown stain and a small brown stain, and they would have seen that there were disturbing stains. It doesn't matter whose DNA this was. You have to keep in mind, at that point in his mindset, all he knows is that he's gotten this car, and there are disturbing signs that the kids or someone could have met with foul play. So I think attempts to minimize, it wasn't, he didn't have it detailed, and he couldn't have possibly known or thought that his mom would do something like this. I just don't think that that's, I mean, whatever people want to do, that is up to them. But I think it runs a pretty far afield, to borrow Rachel Smith's expression, of like what we're trying to do here, which is, okay, what are the facts? The facts are he knew early to mid September that Lori was going to be giving him her car. He knew that at the time police came. He knew to like that he couldn't contact his mom. He had to go through Alex, who he already said was a bum, and he didn't have any respect for Alex, and now he's like going through Alex for this deal. And anyway, and so and then he went and had it cleaned and then continued to use the car and didn't reach out to law enforcement until the case goes public on December 21st. He reached out about the rogue. On December 20th, the case went public. He reached out about the rogue on December 21st. And really that's really my primary issue, is just that, there were some spots that tested positive for blood, but they couldn't get DNA. But we also don't know what might have been destroyed in the detailing, or, whatever was done to the car. It compromised a potential crime scene. Okay. All right. Enough about that. Okay. Yeah, I already covered this. All right. So this was November 21st. This was one of those dates where Lori accessed JJ's old school app, and then there was a Venmo transfer. This was interesting. This was, let's see if I can find it. Okay, this was on November 22nd. Just a second, I'm going to get a drink. There was a text message from Colby, to Colby, again, if my redaction is correct, from Lori. I'm sure she meant I texted Ty to send it, but I haven't heard back yet. So he must have texted her about a Venmo. She will probably just do it before she tells me. And then and I'm assuming this was a follow-up text. Hope you got the Venmo. And yeah, I'm sure this was a follow-up because there was a Venmo on the 21st. Hope you got the Venmo. Ty said she sent it late, obviously. We know now Tylee had been dead for 2.5 months. I'll call you when I get a break. Hope you are having a great day. I love you so much. So this is before the welfare check. So there was a Venmo transfer on the 21st and then another one on the 23rd. I also shared just this really weird detail about November 4th. Rexford police impounded Tylee's Jeep. So they found it on the 31st, and then they got a warrant, and they went and picked it up, and it says no persons were contacted, nor did anyone follow up about the Jeep status during or after the tow/impound. Well, Chad and Lori were at their wedding. They were in Hawaii for their wedding. Oh, that was also important to point out. So when we have a lot going on here, Melanie and Alex travel to Phoenix, then they come back in the rental, and Lori and Chad inquired about rental homes in Hawaii. It's notable that They were searching over 2 days, and they tell prospective landlords that they have no children. And excuse me, this was right before they went to Hawaii. And while they were in Hawaii, so they were in Hawaii from November 3rd to the 6th, Rexburg police impounded the Jeep. So they just came, no one came to the door. If they knocked, I'm sure they would have had to knock on the door, but no one came to the door. And then they just took the Jeep and no one ever followed up. So Lori and Chad, they were busy on their honeymoon, but we know that there was one SOS call while they were in Hawaii. And I suspect that that number was one of Alex's burner phones. I have a spreadsheet that I've been keeping where there are references to different burner phones, because sometimes they leave the phone numbers unredacted, and references will be redacted in one source, but then not another. And so there was one SOS call, and I say that it was SOS because this person called on their honeymoon. So I do wonder if that was in reference to the Jeep, but then they come back, and one, it is notable that there were also 2 Venmo transfers during this time. Again, I'm just making the point that this could be a function more of what was going on internally in Lori's mind. At this point, like when Colby kind of raised a red flag and sent those text messages to Tylee saying that, like he wanted to talk to her that night, and he said, call me tonight, please. That had to incite panic in Lori. It had to have, the only way it wouldn't have is if this had been like planned ahead of time. And I don't believe that. So at that point, Tammy hadn't been killed yet. And Lori and Chad hadn't been married. So she needed his cooperation. So you do see a market pickup in Venmo transactions after that call. So that call was made, that text message where he was imploring Tylee to call on the 28th. You see not just the correlation of Venmos with some of these, sketch events. And I already talked in one live about how I wondered if the plan in Melanie trying to pick up her kids early from school was to take them on this trip to Hawaii, because they left the next day. So there's a whole lot going on here. But even if you pull out to that 100-foot view, you see a dramatic uptick in the number of Venmos after that text message. So this was the text message. There were only 4 Venmo transactions in September, and 2 were around the time that Tylee was murdered, and 2 were around the time that JJ was murdered. And then in October, it really picks up. October and November were, by way of reminder, they were the 2 biggest months in terms of the number of transfers that we know about. Obviously, this also doesn't include any other way that you could transfer money, whether it's through Western Union or their bank or something like that. Okay. All right. So at this point, I think Lori was really paranoid and just needing to make sure, I suspect she just needed to make sure that Colby stayed happy. They needed this, they needed to get through, the kids' murders. They got through those. They needed to then get through Brandon's murder. That was foiled. Then they needed to get through Tammy's murder. Excuse me, I need to drink more. but we, again, this is all allegedly. So I'm operating under the assumption that Lori and Chad knew about all of these murders and played some role in them. So, they get through Tammy's alleged murder and the alleged attempt, and now they're finally on their honeymoon. And so I think that I suspect that those Venmos were more about, that's here, were more about Lori's paranoia, but they occurred nonetheless. And you see them continuing on through October into November. And there was one, this is a pretty loose connection. Oh, was it muted again? Oh, gosh. Okay. It was not blinking. So I'm going to just drop a note in here. I'm sorry, guys. I wanted to drop a note that I'm unmuted. Okay. Okay, I think there's a problem with my mic. Thanks, Jeanette. If this continues, we will just call it a night. We should probably call it a night anyway. Okay. It says that it's not muted. Can you hear me? Okay, someone just said you can hear me now. I apologize. Someone says sound on, someone says no sound. Okay, I'm going to go with the majority. Yeah. Karen, you might just want to refresh your browser or your app. Okay, so I've always wondered why Lori and Chad didn't take off when they got back from their honeymoon or just stay in Hawaii. Chad might have had to take care of some business at his house because there were 2 children buried on his property and his kids were living there. But they would have come back and found out that Rexford police took the Jeep, so they would have had to be at pretty peak paranoia at this point. So it is shocking to me that they hung around as long as they did, because they came back on November 6th. The welfare check wasn't for 20 more days. That's almost 3 weeks that they just hung out. And I've wondered if Princess trying to get her kids was the reason they hung around, because they also needed to keep Melanie calm. And here Melanie I have very little empathy for Melanie. I still do have some empathy for Melanie. One of the most haunting pictures and sometimes I've shared this before. This isn't any kind of flex. At times it's annoying because I'll feel empathy towards someone I don't particularly want to feel empathy toward. But the picture that Steve Cope painted of Melanie putting the letter that she wrote her mom as she was, in hospice, and I'm sure Melanie knew this would be the last time she would see her mom alive. And she wrote a note. She was very young at this time and put it in her mom's hand. So the people who got caught up in all of this because there is a significant amount of brokenness. So I'm not making excuses for anyone, but I'm also not judging anyone. That's going to be up for a jury to do. I have my strong preferences for Chad and Lori, but yeah, and for everyone else, it's it just going through these trials will be incredibly taxing on anyone who has anything to hide. But okay, so I suspect that there was a very, very high level of chaos through all of this. I mean, Melanie was arrested and now she's going to have to appear in court in Utah. And, they're just trying to figure everything out. And you see these rapid fire memos. Again, not an indictment against Colby per se, but it does suggest that Lori knew what would work for him, and she exploited that vulnerability. And even with I've heard people say Colby needs to get a job and all of those things. I'm not going to speak to that, but I will speak to, again, as a mom, like I do everything I can. Now I've it, as with my entire life, I feel like I have more failures than successes. So I'm not flexing in my parenthood or anything like that. I'm just saying that as a mom, I have done everything I can do to help my kids succeed. Case in point, my one daughter and I were in this data science program together. In the midst of going through this program, I kind of went off on my own and learned this really, really cool, it's a Python package. Excuse me. Now I'm terrified to hit the mute button, but it's better than the alternative. But I learned this one package and I reached out to my daughter. I was like, I have to teach you this package. Like, this will increase your earning ability at least $20,000 a year. And I don't engage in hyperbole. Mm-hmm. It was just a really, really cool skill. And so we spent much of a weekend just going through this. So where am I going with this? I am saying, like, from the time my kids started talking about what they wanted to do or be when they grew up, like, we would go to, salary.com to see the low, mid, high salaries as they gained experience. We would go to a careerbuilder.com and, different job hunting sites just to see like the type of experience they want, the education that they want. And because I am more tech oriented, I help them through college. I help them through high school. I never did their projects for them, but my point is, I will do everything I know to do to help them succeed. But you kind of have to understand, in Lori's mindset, although I do believe that she did love Colby as much as a narcissist can. I do believe she is a narcissist, a malignant narcissist at that. He was the favored one of the two of them. And comparing Colby and Tylee. But you just don't see that same attention. Like you don't see evidence of Lori, like, you know, like giving him any kind of career counseling or encouraging him to, pursue college, or, like helping him, like teaching him to fish. You see, like there was one, it was an email that Kay had sent to Detective Moffat, where she said that Charles was paying for Colby, and Colby's name fit in the redaction, for their rent, their car insurance, groceries, baby supplies. We already knew about their devices, and so you just see this enabling, and this would have been at Lori's behest. No, there's no question in my mind that this would not have been although Charles was very generous, I don't think he would have gravitated toward being that way with his stepkids, because he wasn't with his own kids. They went to college, and so anyway, so I just wonder how much of this, whether Lori was even conscious of this, how much Lori hamstrung Colby to keep him dependent, because dependence, as long as he was dependent on her, he was somewhat easy to control. I mean, I think he threw a monkey wrench in there with that text to Tylee on the 28th, but and personality wise, I've talked about this before. He was very tenderhearted as a little boy, and he was very compliant. Whereas, Tylee, her personality was much more, strong-willed. Had like strong opinions. I mean, she just had a much stronger personality. So, Lori, I suspect for years had also most likely been exploiting Colby's loyalty and his compliance. Okay. So, all right. Colby has this email exchange with Lori. We're pretty close to wrapping up here. So this, I unredacted these, but they were very straightforward redactions. In the Lori for Style iCloud account, I'm reasonably confident that it was that iCloud account, but it doesn't matter. It's either Lori for Style or the I forget what it was called. I forget what it was called. But Lolly Time, that was the other iCloud account. But in the iCloud account, a series of emails were located between Lori and her son, Colby Ryan, after the disappearance of Tylee and JJ on 11/28. So this was the day after the welfare check at Colby's, which was the day after the welfare check in Rexburg. Colby sent his mother an email that read, "Mom, you changed your number. What's going on?" Lori didn't respond until December 2nd. Now, also keep in mind, in between here was when Colby took possession of the Rogue. And it was also notable that the Rogue had been at the Ian's sister's house since the 28th. So they didn't do the handover right away. So that is also questionable. Like, was Melanie using the car, or were they kind of sweating Colby out? Who knows? but so Colby sent this email, then he takes possession of the Rogue on the 30th, and then 2 days later Lori replied, "Hi Colby, I need you to know that we are safe and happy. I know this sounds confusing to you, but I need you to trust me that although there are wicked people trying to cause harm, that Jesus is on our side and taking care of us. Although we may be out of touch for a while, I will continue to help you. I love you all so much. The car and car insurance will be paid for so you can drive it with no worries. So she's doubling down on like, I'm taking care of you here. I'm giving you the car and I'm taking care of the payment so you can drive it with no worries. I mean, that's pretty much a statement of the obvious that there would be no worries if she's taking care of the payments. But the phones will also be good. You are precious to your mama. So here we have the love bombing. I love you so much. Kisses to, and then this was, I think Riley and Kelsey. I think Riley was first and Kelsey. I hope to talk to you soon. I will continue to pray blessings on your family constantly. Colby responded by writing, okay, Mom, I love you. Please be smart and take care of the kids and yourself. I don't know what's going on, but I'm praying for all of you. I'm mad and sad, but I know I can't control anything going on. Please be safe, all of you. We love you, and if you can help us at all through Venmo too, that would help. I'm going to get a second job, but until then, we could use a little help. You have helped us so much with the car and phones, so thank you for that. I love you all. Okay. Oh, whoops. Okay, finish with those. Okay, so let's talk about how Colby came into possession of the car. So what I did was I just took all of the pages from these FOIA docs that talked about the rogue and stitched them together in a PDF. Originally, it kept all the original page numbers, but now they're missing. But you can see the pages down here and what department it's from. Okay, so we're just going to hit how he came into possession. Concerning the Nissan Rogue, Colby estimated, and we already read that. Yeah. Colby said because he could not contact Lori, the only other person he had a telephone number for was Alexander. Colby said he communicated with Alexander via both telephone and text message and his number. Colby told Alexander he could not communicate with Lori and was inquiring about the vehicle. Alexander confirmed the vehicle would be made available for Colby to pick up. Alexander also added, and I think Tylee and JJ fit in here, were fine. On the morning of 11:30, Alexander sent Colby a text message providing the address, and this was Ian's sister's address, in Mesa, and said the keys for the vehicle would be in the glove box. The residence was identified as the home of a friend of Melanie Boudreau. It was Ian's sister. Shortly after receiving the text message, Colby went to the residence where he found the vehicle unlocked with the vehicle keys in the glove box. And then Gilbert police went to Ian's sister and interviewed her the day after Christmas. On 12/26 at approximately 12:50 hours, I arrived at that address to conduct a follow-up reference, yada yada. This residential address was provided by Colby Ryan as the location where he came into possession of Lori Vallow's Nissan Rogue on 11:30. Hannah, that was Ian's sister, confirmed a blue Nissan Rogue had been driven to the residence by Melanie around the time of Thanksgiving and later picked up by an unknown subject. Hannah said the Nissan Rogue was left parked in front of their residence and she was told someone would be picking up the vehicle. Hannah said she was not comfortable with that because keep in mind, she's just Ian's sister. She's not part of this group or, this is, I'm sure, her first experience with welcome to the Cox family. And there are bizarre details in here. Anyway, no, I'm going to stay focused here. When they return, oh, okay. Hannah said she was not comfortable with that, but on 11/30/2019, she and her husband left their residence in the morning. When they returned at approximately noon, the Nissan Rogue was no longer at their residence. Hannah did not know who came to retrieve the vehicle. And speaking about how like weird they all were, there was a note here where Hannah said that approximately 2 weeks ago, she was told by Ian that Melanie was told Al had taken care of, and the children fits in here. Tylee and JJ did not. So this is a redaction, and I'm normally a little less comfortable doing redactions like this, where there are potentially other solutions or possible fill-ins. However, the reason I included it is this is a direct quote that we've seen elsewhere that Ian had made when he wrote out his notes. That he said that Melanie said Al may have had to take care of the kids. Okay. But it was unknown what that statement meant. So, and Melanie also told them about Brandon being shot at and how he was blaming her. So I imagine they were really freaked out. She had to be wondering, what has Ian gotten himself into? Because they're just appearing here for Thanksgiving, and then they get married the next day. I think Ian and Melanie got married first, and then Alex and Zulema. So I mean, all of this had to have been very, very weird for her. Okay. And then the blood analysis. So again, like I said, I'm not going to go into a lot of detail about the blood analysis because I've already covered that. But this said, this was a detective leaving notes. They had already gotten the vehicle. Then they came back to Colby and Kelsey's on December 23rd and collected DNA samples. And it said here, I had previously advised Colby of the preliminary presence of blood located in the Nissan Rogue. Thus, I wanted to obtain, I think it's buckle swab samples from he, Kelsey, and that's Riley for possible DNA comparison. And then there was this other reference here. A visual search for blood was conducted. Several stains were tested using whatever presumptive blood kit, yielding positive results. The stains were marked, photographed, and collected as follows. And this was the left rear setup, left rear seat cutout, right rear seat belt, right rear seat cutout. But there was another reference, which I've already read, that went into a little more detail about the right rear seat cutout. That's what it talked about, was along the edge where someone would have sat. A visual search for latent blood was then conducted using a Blue Star presumptive test. The right rear seatbelt hanger provided a positive reaction with Blue Star, that's luminal, and was then tested using a presumptive blood kit, yielding positive results. So I already covered that. This is just for transparency purposes, that this was the only one that they needed to use luminol, that's what the Blue Star is, to find it. Okay. All right, and I think that's all. There's one other note. Let's see. During the processing of the vehicle, distinct stains were located in the back passenger area of the vehicle. The stains were confirmed to be blood. So again, it's this note that these were distinct stains, and that's really at the heart of this. Do Colby and Kelsey have plausible deniability that they wouldn't have known that there was blood in the car. And I would suggest no, probably not. We'll see when they show the images in court. But okay. So, again, a lot of chaos here. December 8th, this is when Melanie recorded the call with Lori and Chad. We know that Lori had some degree of suspicion because she said, like when, I think it was when Melanie said like, oh, I don't know what you're talking about. I've never seen your computer. And she was saying she didn't know about Kay making herself, in Lori's mind, making herself the beneficiary. So Lori was like, I don't know why you're being argumentative. She didn't say argumentative, but it was something to that effect. And I don't know if you're recording the call for police or what, but she was, there was cause for concern. And I have wondered, so I will speculate on this with a clear intent to do that. I have wondered, and I shared this in Cool Cats, if this call was contrived, if it was actually planned ahead of time. Melanie was very, very angry at that Lori threw her under the bus. Even when Melanie talks about this, she can talk about the kid's deaths with ease. Even the fact that JJ, like most likely was murdered while she was in the home, it doesn't bother her. But when she talks about Lori chucking her under the bus, she makes the point in the recorded call with Sherry, and when she is interviewed by Nate Eaton, maybe also Dateline, I'm not sure, but she like stops and prepares the interviewer, like, well, in Sherry's case, it was just who she was talking to, but she stops and is like, this part, this is hard for me. It's like, just she so clearly felt violated, and understandably so. Lori and Chad both lied, and then they urged her to lie, which she did. But so I suspect that Lori would have been in a heightened state, wondering, at minimum, even if this call wasn't contrived, and if it was planned out, I suspect that Melanie went off script with her little core horror rebuke. And I think that's when it just kind of spiraled out of control. That's my theory. We'll find out possibly more at trial, because these people couldn't stop talking. But anyway, but lots of chaos, lots of suspicion, and sketchy things going down. Even the fact that, like, during this time, I didn't include it because I already was including too many things, but I do talk about it in my timeline, that Lori, like, I suspect that Lori was the one who published these podcasts that they had recorded with David Warwick when he was in Rexburg. So they didn't publish them right away. I think that Lori kept those as like an insurance plan to keep David quiet. Because you see that Lori was very suspicious of David, and you picked up on that even in the recorded call with Melanie. Like, she thinks that, David is, putting thoughts in her mind, and he's, potentially dark, and anyone who questions what she's doing. So I think that those podcasts were insurance on her part, because that podcast that they did was released in 3 parts throughout this week. I think, like, starting maybe December 2nd. So this was after the welfare check. It was all throughout this week. These podcasts were being published. And I suspect that was a shot across the bow from Lori and Chad to David. Like, don't even think about, doing anything crazy, because you were here when JJ was murdered. And so I suspect that's what has kept David and Melanie cooperative. But okay. And last but not least, the date, again, more memo transfers. Like I said, December was also a big month. I think if I recall correctly, I showed the chart, but I think it was 9. No, I think December was 7. So I think October was 9, November was 9, and December was 7. You can let me know if I'm wrong. But the day before the case went public, and I do suspect that family members who were involved at this time, not involved, but aware of what was going on, the law enforcement will typically give us a heads up before any big news breaks. So I don't know when that would have been. Typically it's right before the news breaks, but and I didn't even include Alex's death. Obviously that was also in here. Oh no, I did. Okay. Yeah. Alex died. I don't, yeah. Just like, yeah, okay, he died. But so 1 week after Alex died and the day before the case went public, Colby announced his YouTube channel. He did have a YouTube channel, and he had kind of like tried the YouTuber thing before, but he rebranded as CJ's Place. He launched with 3 kind of lighthearted videos, and it seemed like he was trying to gain traction as a YouTuber. When I scraped the page, it scraped the thumbnail as well as the URL. This video has since been deleted, and you could tell, like, he was planning on having seasons and episodes. So this was season 1, episode 1, and it was very lighthearted. It was like, welcome to CJ's Place. I'm super excited to be launching a channel that I can finally talk about more things in depth. I want to be honest, real, and talk about things I'm interested in. You guys can come with your boy and see how everything shapes out, but welcome all. And had it not been for just the severity of what was going on. I've talked about this before. I didn't find out about the kids until December 28th. So the day I found out, like, I just cleared my schedule and just searched for everything I could find. And I searched for Colby and came across his YouTube channel. And so I was very surprised as I was watching, the first 3 videos, that it was just so light. And then eventually, he started talking about the case. But when he started talking about the case, like, he wasn't addressing his mom directly. So I had a post in the first group that we were in. And anyway, again, this is just correlation. I had, at this point, I was very angry. I wouldn't have done this live if I still had those like hot feelings of anger. I'm not saying I'm not angry about some of these like contradictions and things like that. I'm not being disingenuous, but I don't have that, like that same, like the shock, the trauma, the anger, just, all of those raging emotions. But at that time I had a post that it looked like he was playing the fiddle while Rome burned, so to see these kind of lighthearted videos in light of this, just unbelievably horrible tragedy, and that he was still doing these, lighthearted videos. That was very disturbing to me at the time. But I think, now having some distance, I think he just, sometimes the heart just wants what it wants. And I think he just wanted to be a YouTuber. And I think he just thought like he could, garner some of this publicity actually become a YouTuber. So, not a horrible thing, just notable that this was something that happened. Okay, and then as I mentioned, the day after the case went public at 9 a.m. That morning, and I don't think that this one opened. Yeah, it did. But this isn't one I think that says, but one of the screenshots, I have it in Cool Cats, but it's makes the note that like Colby called at 9 a.m. So the detective found that notable. So I do wonder if he just like watched the news coverage on the 20th. I mean, here you have the FBI, all it, and I think he probably just, what felt very trapped, very fearful. And then the next morning, came clean. And then that's when they, got a warrant for the car and took the car. And the rest is history. So, okay. All right. This was another marathon live, but, all right. I am going to stop sharing my screen. I'm pretty tired, but I'll take a few questions, and then we'll wrap it up. All right. As always, it does tend to be helpful if you put question in all caps. It just makes your question stand out. Even if you asked a question earlier in the live, sometimes I wish when I go back over the lives, I wish I could actually answer some of the questions, but I can't in any way interact with the chat. So I just kind of make a mental note. But yeah, if you asked your question earlier in the live, the chances of me seeing it are probably pretty slim. So you might want to drop it again. Yeah, Connie, I've heard that theory that Colby had the road clean because Melanie's dog hair was in it, but I think they got that dog after they moved to Arizona, because there's no reference to a dog anywhere. So maybe, but I kind of doubt it. But again, even if there was dog hair on the front seat, like get a handheld vacuum, or just like go to a gas station and vacuum it. Like, especially if you're cash strapped or just frugal, like you don't have to take it in somewhere. So if past is prologue, now here I'm finished the presentation. So I will edge a little bit into the conjecture lane at this point. If past is prologue, we saw the pattern with when Lori and Colby packed up Charles' truck with his belongings, and we know from the FOIA docs that Lori left money in an envelope in the glove box. So I do wonder if Lori may have left money in the glove box. We know the keys were left in the glove box, but this may have been a mandate. Like the car might have come with the condition that you get it cleaned. If so, again, and if that's true, again, this would speak to just how brutal Lori is to just ensure silence by making sure everyone's hands are dirty enough that no one will go to the police. We don't know. That is conjecture. Okay, I see. I'm mostly seeing comments. Yeah, I'm just not going to comment on comments like hindsight is 2020. I mean, that is true, but it is a bit of a raging statement of the obvious. And, like one or two missteps, I think that could be folded into something that casual of an explanation. But yeah. Oh, crocheting Bambi. You always have good questions. She asked, I don't know, this might be sexist on my part to assume because it has crocheting that you're a female. But do you think David's nightmare was his way of trying to stop them from killing JJ? You know what? I just don't know. Of all of the like group members who were involved, I, I do think that David is the most sincere of them. I think that he has the strongest conscience of, excuse me, really losing my voice. I think he has the strongest conscience of everyone who was like directly involved from this group. And maybe even outside this group. And you do see like some humility on his part when he testified. You do not see that with Melanie, and it is not going to go over well with a jury. Not that it really matters what a jury thinks of Melanie. She doesn't have to be a Girl Scout to have the things that she has in that recording. But all that to say, yeah, I don't know. I'm like, I feel like I have all of these different factoids, like shooting at me. But I wondered if JJ was murdered in the middle of the night because of like Melanie's weird reference of like trying to open Lori's door in the middle of the night. But and then, David's nightmare. But Melanie seemed, and again, this is pure conjecture. So we're finished the presentation. Pure conjecture. Just trying to put pieces together with the very little information we have at this point. But that her reaction to the 8 p.m. Text message, or was it a phone call? I forget. From Lori to Melanie. Oh, it was text message, because she seemed very, very surprised that these text messages had not been deleted, and she looks panicked on her face. But well, obviously on her face. I'm sorry, it's very late. But anyway, so yeah, she looked panicked. So that made me question if JJ was actually murdered at that 8 p.m. range on Sunday night before they did their podcast, because there's also a weird reference from Lori that that JJ had woken up and she was getting him back to sleep. So it's kind of weird. It's 8 p.m. on a Sunday and he didn't go to bed super early. So it seems it seems plausible that they had JJ drugged, and then like he was actually dead when Alex brought him in. And I've always kind of wondered that, because people can have a tendency to overstate things when they're trying to, cover things up or really convince someone. And so it just seemed to me when David made that point of like, he thought that it was a tender moment when Alex was carrying JJ, perhaps, but there's also the possibility that they knew JJ was dead, and and so it may have been that David was tormented by the thought of a dead child being in this house. So anyway, I don't know. Okay. Jean asked, when did Ian wear the hidden recorder for the cops, before or after Vegas wedding? After. So he and Natalie went and talked to the police. I think it was December 5th. And then he went back by himself December 6th, but they were married on, I think they were married on November 29th, and Alex and Zulema were married on November 30th. So yeah, after. Amanda said, please point us to the documentation if it is available. Otherwise, we can't confirm it. I mean, I did that through this entire live, so I might be missing context here, but and like I said, I mean, I'm going to look into the ability to turn off comments. I just do not have capacity right now to put this out there, knowing how these trolls and sock puppets behave. I'm just, if there's not the ability to turn off comments, I'm not going to share it. But once burned, twice shy. But yeah, that's why I opened things up, and at least you can rewatch the video and pause. So okay. So I mean, there's no question this is a difficult topic. It required the wisdom of Solomon, but I'm not Solomon. So, but that's why I just tried to make it as dry and fact focused as possible. I try to do that with all of the lives, but especially with this one, I tried to keep, beyond just like tying thoughts together. I tried not to weigh in too much outside of just the facts. Okay. I'm going to take 2 more questions, and then I'm going to go to bed. I'll look and see if there are any more recent questions. Phyllis asked, do I happen to know if Lori's pregnancy with Tylee was planned? According to the FOIA docs from their divorce and the notes that I have, no. Yeah. So, yeah. It may have been planned by one of them, but it was not planned by Joe. So he loved Tylee. There was no question about that, but I think he was hoping that they would have more time together. And he also fell and broke his back. So yeah. Question, why were both apartments empty in Rexburg? I think I'm not sure if you mean before or after the welfare check. Alex's was empty. Yeah, his was mostly empty. Originally, the affidavit of probable cause said that there were only like a couple things in the garage, but then there was a whole cache of weapons that were found. So But yeah, that was it. A couple things in the garage, and then he had a bunch of guns. And I suspect that he left the guns behind because he was worried that, if they were pulled over, and he had a whole bunch of guns, he could be arrested on the spot because he was not a legal carry. As far as Lori and Melanie's apartment wasn't emptied out at all. So she was the only one who actually came back to Rexburg. She and Ian came back. But Lori's, we don't know how. I suspect that she left most of the furniture, and they knew about the storage unit because she left the contract in her apartment. So they clearly packed up and left in a hurry. But again, I mean, it's just so it speaks to just how disorganized and chaotic and unintelligent these criminals were. Like, the Jeep was gone, like that was the quintessential canary in the coal mine, like they weren't going to get away with this much longer, and so it's, they had almost 3 weeks heads up before the welfare check. So I would have thought they would all of the apartments would have been cleaned out. But anyway, thank you, Lisa. Yes, to anyone who's a mother watching the live, happy Mother's Day. Oh, the orange hearts. Phyllis really wanted that question answered. I've seen it, I think, 4 times now. Lynn asked, I believe Melanie knew. Do you think David did? If I had to put money down, I would say yes. They both knew. I think so. I think it's part of the reason they have so much to hide. And, again, in my opinion, the other thing that makes me think he knew was just their behavior afterwards. Like, you would have thought they would have just wanted to get out of Dodge, and they did leave, but there was somewhere in the FOIA docs, there was a mention, I think Melanie called Lori. I don't want to misspeak, but I think she called her 3 times, and they talked on the phone multiple times after they left. And then Melanie also said that Lori offered for her to take JJ, for Melanie to take JJ, and she told detectives that she declined. And then also David's bizarre story about the cabinets, and even I've talked about this in other lives, but even just him, saying he demanded to see JJ, and at that time of morning, JJ should have been in school. Lori shouldn't have been able to present JJ. But again, if Melanie and David were a little smarter, more cunning, if he had said that Lori said, well, you can't, he's already at school. Even if she had said Alex came and picked up JJ and took him to school, he would have some plausible deniability. But he said that Alex came and took JJ because he was acting like a zombie, and so that strips them of plausible deniability, in my opinion. And then the story of the cabinets, this is a pretty small townhouse. And JJ has a very loud voice. I've talked about that in other lives, but Kay and Larry have also talked about it, that he was very loud. So if he had been acting like a zombie and climbing up on the cabinets, like this would have been loud. Like this would have been a significant disturbance. And, but we're supposed to believe that they were up and they were getting ready. We know that they were up, I think, around 7 or something like that. And so they would have been up and getting ready and they wouldn't have heard any of this. So I just think, although he does, of this population of people who have varying levels of complicity, I do think that he is the most honest, and he's the only one I really have any real hope of like being as close to honest as possible without taking the risk of joining Chad in jail. But yeah, I think they both knew. Catlink makes a really good point. They said, just seems like an unnecessary risk to kill JJ with MG and David in the house, especially when Lori and Alex would have had privacy in less than 24 hours. And I totally agree. But I think I suspect that prosecution, I don't think that they're going to go after anyone else except Lori and Chad. But it won't just be the prosecution presenting evidence. It'll also be the defense. And so I suspect things are going to come out that will, I don't know. I don't know how to say it as loosely as possible. My personal theory is that this was part of Melanie Lori making sure everyone's hands were dirty. If David hadn't stayed with them for this event, he could have pulled Melanie away. He wouldn't have had that much to hide. We know that he was at that meeting that Lori had in her house right after Charles was killed. It was the first week in August, and David spoke at it, and Chad was also in town for that. So this was August 2019, I think, like August 2nd, maybe. It was a Saturday. So he was, I think it's probably pretty safe to assume he may have participated in one of the castings, because there is at least one reference to there being at least 2 castings in August. So, so he could have already been somewhat, involved in all of this. And, but I think if they murdered JJ while Melanie and David were in the house, the juice was worth the squeeze. Being able to lock them down and keep them silent because they still had a lot more of their mission to go. I think it would have been worth it. And I think that both Lori and Chad were reasonably confident that whatever happened during that time that Melanie and David were there, that they would stay quiet, which they did. Okay. All right. Justine said, in my opinion, David plays stupid. I think to some degree, yes. Anonymous asked, how have you managed to handle the stress and anxiety of this horrific experience? It just, it, I- I've handled it in batches, because the case has been revealed in batches. In 2020, I got to a point where I was just so angry, and I'm normally just not an angry person. I get angry, but I'm not like, that's not my default setting. So it was, it's a heavy lift. And so in 2021, I just started thinking, like, I was just trying to dig out, and I thought I need to I need to get that kind of joie de vivre back, and so I really enjoy learning new things. And so one of the things that helped me probably more than anything besides distance was I just started using my social media accounts to do like fun shares. And I just started looking up like fun facts and sharing them. Well, I spent like a few weeks just like looking them up. I had like all these like subreddits and Pinterest and different places that I went, and it was so interesting to me. And I noticed that like the nightmares were, I didn't really have that many nightmares. It was more like waking up in the middle of the night and just being so angry, and waking up first thing in the morning and being so angry. But and it wasn't even over any one particular thing. It was like whatever the latest news release was. And but anyway, so I just started like sharing these things, and yeah, at that, like over a period of it was a pretty, like I noticed within weeks, like my internal barometer, just kind of eased. And so yeah, that really, it was like just bit by bit, I just started to see like the world as a less threatening place. Because also keep in mind, as all of this was happening, this was 2020. We went into lockdown, and this city that I like get so much energy from was like a ghost town, like it was just, and I've talked about it, it was like so crazy to like, I would be able to ride my bike and my scooter. I have an electric scooter because adrenaline. I'd be able to ride it down the middle of like main streets and just like weave and stuff. There were that few cars on the road. I mean, I'm talking like, like 6th Avenue and like 2nd Avenue, like really, really big streets in the city. And yeah, so that just made it so much like, I don't know. Yeah, it was just a very strange thing. And so so the world seemed threatening. Everyone was like, wearing masks, but then internally everything felt threatening. And I was like, I just need to find like the beauty in the world again. I know it sounds a little Pollyanna-ish, but like my kids tease me that like I'm like that girl who's like, look at that building, look at the way the sun's shining off of it. And I mean, just like pretty, when I'm relaxed and I'm in an environment with people I trust, and I'm not focused on facts, I do just tend to be kind of easily excitable. And so my kids will tease me about that, and I just kind of bit by bit found that again. So yeah, and then just distance, and but yeah, and also finding an amazing support within the true crime community. So I started like shutting off access that people had to me, because I was just getting bombarded with like messages over Facebook and trolls and people pretending to be like like pretending to be sincere, but then they were also just trolls. And, and so I just started locking down everything, and I started blocking like just everyone, not everyone, but like I just eventually had to get to a place where I was like, I don't owe anyone anything. So so like it got to a point because, it was like trying to bail water out of a sinking boat. I was just like, okay, one strike, you're out. If the puck gets past the goalie, I'm just blocking. And anyway, so that also helped. And then I just eventually found a group in 2021 where like of people I really really trust, and and then restricted myself to just one person gets my unguarded thoughts, after like some betrayals and stuff. But anyway, so yeah, that's how it is. But I'm not like putting my best foot forward in these lives. If I'm not doing well, you won't see me. Like I disappear. I'm like a mole, and I go and get back to equilibrium and then reemerge. But okay. And yes, okay. Someone else answered that question. I don't want to end on a note about me, because then it could look like I put that question out there. I would never do something like that. And one of my proudest claims that I can honestly make, God is my witness, I have never one single time have I ever posted anything about this case under a sock puppet account. I have only posted from verified accounts. I would never engage in something even as simple as like dropping a question from, a different account that I really want someone to ask. I would never ask someone to ask me a question. And I would never do anything like that. But still, I mean, people are going to believe whatever they want to believe. So I'll answer one more question about the case, and then I'll bounce. True crime addict asked, do you think either of the Melanies will get arrested or charged? I just don't have a lot of confidence in that. I wouldn't put money on anything, but every once in a while I'll say that, and it's still contrived because I wouldn't actually ever bet on something, but that's more a function of my frugality than yeah. Anyway, whatever, I'm getting off focus here. I just don't think that there's an appetite to like pursue criminal charges for anyone other than Lori and Chad. And I can only imagine the workload that these people are dealing with, everyone who is preparing for these trials. So I won't offer commentary on that. But do I think that they were complicit? Yes. Yes, I do. Some more so than others, but I just don't see law enforcement going after them. This will be the last one. When Melanie's mother passed in hospice care, was she at home with Alex or in a care facility? She was in a care facility. And we know that because when Steve Cope, Melanie's father, was interviewed, he made the point that I think it was Janice's brother. Yeah, I think it was another Cox family member was in the same hospice. So they were actually at a place. And also there was a note that Steve had made that when they came to the room, Alex wouldn't let him in. He said only Melanie could come in, but he said that he wasn't going to agree to that. And Alex eventually let him come in. So yeah, she was at a facility. Okay. On that note, thank you. And next week we will have a live Q&A. And then I mentioned this in the last live, but I'm going to be taking off a few weeks because I just need to take care of some stuff. And I don't know how long that will be, but it's not because of like I'm decompressing or anything like that. I mean, this live was stressful, but it's not like, okay, I did this live about Colby and now I have to go into hiding. Not that I would feel ashamed by that, but there are other things I need to take care of. So we'll have the live Q&A next week and then a few weeks off. And again, happy Mother's Day to the moms out there, and we'll talk soon. Good night.